All right.
you,
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We apologize for the delay in joining you. I hope everyone has had a chance to enjoy the snow a little bit, the very, very heavy snow. So in that we are late, I will just, I will skip the president's report. Just thank everyone who's joining us tonight. We're always so happy to see how many people have continued to join the Board of Education meetings. But given that we are already running late, I will turn this right over to Dr. Stepankiewicz for the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fuller. All right, so a number of things that we have going on. So first and foremost, I think up front is we are in the process now of, kind of planning the next phase of student return to the secondary schools. There have been many conversations over the last couple of weeks with our pandemic response teams at the school level, at TOIS and OTHS. There's been conversation with the district-wide task force, and there have been conversations from the TOIS principal and the OTHS principal, Ms. Kasuba and Mr. Amato, on what we need to do to start the planning process for our 6th through 12th grade students returning to more days per week. We are right now not talking about expanding the elementary level at this point. They've been 4 days a week since October, late October, mid-November. And it's been, nothing's been easy, but, the teachers there have done a terrific job, and that is progressing. But we feel at this point, that we're okay there. We do feel that we need to begin the planning process because for a couple of reasons. One, there are indications that we are hopefully starting to see the downward side of the second wave of cases. I mean, we're in the early part of it, but cases are starting to drop overall a little bit. I mean, they're still high, but they're starting to come down. Hospitalizations are starting to come down. And most importantly is that since September and since the return of the elementary students, we can still continue to see we do not see transmissions going on in our schools. And we can say that across the state of New Jersey. In our schools, we've spoken to the fact that of all of the students and adults that we've had to quarantine as a result of close contacts, what have you, we've only had one individual who has ultimately then tested positive. That's out of several hundred people quarantined. And that individual also has contact with that student outside of school. We don't even know for sure that it was an in-school transmission, but we can say, this certainly could have been. That doesn't mean there may not have been other people within the school environment, but in terms of the people we've had to quarantine, only one individual has ultimately tested positive for COVID. In the state, you look at the state data, there's 1.6 million students and staff in the state of New Jersey in public schools, K-12 public schools. There have been 629 transmissions statewide. That's as of the COVID dashboard for the state, as per them, out of 1.6 million individuals. So the rate of transmission in schools, because of the practices and procedures and the safety measures that have been put in place, has been very low. I did have a staff-wide town hall last Thursday. We had about 220 staff members and we invited Dave Henry, who's the health officer for the Monmouth County Regional Health Commission. Dave visited us here at the board a couple of months ago, and we had a really great conversation, a lot of questions from staff talking about the concerns of, bringing back the kids. And, overall, it was a very good, positive discussion. We certainly understand that, there's anxieties about it. We get it. We completely understand it. We've been dealing with that since the beginning of the school year in terms of coming back and every phase, that we put into place. But with every phase, we have certainly seen that the in-school transmissions have not been significant. Now, that being said, and also we're watching other districts. Homedale, for example, has brought back their middle and high school students to, I think, 5 days a week, if I'm not mistaken. Freehold Regional District is about to, I think, starting Friday, I think, or maybe Monday,
I think
whatever.
Monday,
Because they moved it back because of snow. But they're looking to come back 5 days a week for the students who want to. Remember, this isn't all students. The remote option would still be available to those students who wish to take advantage of that. But for the students who wish to return, we want to be able to give them the opportunity to do so. And if for some reason the numbers start, don't continue to drop and start to go back up, then we would obviously have to reevaluate any plan to add more kids into the mix. Also, that being said, more vaccines being distributed, and I'll talk about vaccines in a moment. But this is where we are, and what's the time frame? We're looking at about a month out to start this. We were hoping for a little earlier, but we got pushed back for a couple of reasons. So, we're hopeful by around March 1st that we can start that rollout of incrementally. It would be the 9, 12, and 6 around March 1st, and then a few weeks after that, the remainder of the kids. The next step in this is once we settle on, part of the challenge is that we need to, and we've discussed this at other board meetings, that there may be a need to modify the secondary schedules, because injecting more kids into the mix on a daily basis may make it very difficult for us to facilitate lunch and some of those things. So we're not talking about a purely early dismissal schedule, but we're talking about something perhaps in between the full day and the early dismissal schedule, so that all the kids would get all of their blocks at least 75 minutes a day. We want to maintain the academic integrity of our program, but at the same time, unlike the elementary schools where they can eat lunch in the classrooms, and we do move some kids to the cafeteria, it's really not possible to do that to the same level at the secondary level. So we may need to modify the schedule. That's what Mrs. Kasuba and Mr. Amato has been working with our staff on. So we're trying to work that out. Once we have that, we have basically the parent questionnaire, but we want to be able to have parents know what they are and kids know what they are potentially agreeing to. We could put something out that says, this is what we're thinking, but we'll get feedback to say, well, how do I know if I'm coming if I don't know what I'm coming back to? So we want to be as clear about what people would be coming back to so they can make an informed decision. And so that's what, last time we spoke, we talked about a questionnaire. That's what's held that up, because we want to make sure we know exactly what people are going to be coming back to. So that's where that process is. So we're hopeful, within the next couple of days, that questionnaire will go out and we'll be able to let people know exactly what the plan would be. And then they would be able to let us know what their intention would be. It would be, we kind of said it that, we went out last year on March 16th, and that's when we went out, and how nice it would be to potentially get get our kids back by that time this year. We're taking a full year. Let me talk about vaccines for a moment. I got an email this weekend from the county superintendent saying that they would like for us to develop a list of people who would wish to get vaccinated. That's educators, teachers, who will be in the 1B category. I think we still have a ways to go in the 1A, from what I understand, but they want this list to start being developed. Even though we've inquired about them coming here and doing vaccinations here in the district, they're looking to do vaccinations in one of the 4 county sites. And they want us to provide them with 25% of the people who want to be vaccinated. So if we get 100 people who want to get vaccinated district-wide, we're in the first sort of run, we're allowed 25, basically, is what they're telling us. So we then have to give them, and they ask me to prioritize those individuals. Good, okay. And they're saying that we could put people who fall into high-risk categories, to the front, but anybody who would be in a high-risk category would now fall under 1A, so I'm not exactly sure, you know. So I've spoken with Mr. Riley, and we will come up with a process by which we fairly and correctly, we would probably have to involve our school doctors, our school, physicians, and come up with a process that is fair for people. It may involve, quite frankly, a lottery if we have more people that fall under a certain category. We're not sure exactly how we're going to do it yet, but this is the directive that I got over the weekend from the county superintendent, and that came from Chris Merkel, who is the head of the Department of Health in Monmouth County. So that's where we are sort of with
So it's
vaccines.
25% of whatever number responds. So 25% of 10 or 25% of 200?
Correct.
Interesting.
Yes. And right now, I don't know if that just means teachers or all employees.
Okay.
I'm trying to get a clarification on that.
Do we
So-
know how many teachers or staff have already received the vaccine?
I do not. But the first step that Mr. Riley and I spoke about is doing a survey of staff of who would be, who would be interested in getting this. So we'd have an idea of people who would want to do it. But no, I don't have an idea at this point of who's been vaccinated. I know who we as a district, our nurses, some of our other service providers are, I could say who's been made available to. Athletic trainers, nurses, some of our service therapy providers, some of those folks it's been available to, but I can't say exactly who or how
Will
many.
you collect that information as you ask who will want it, say who has already received it?
I'd have to look in if that's a question that we can ask, right, exactly, if they're willing to do it, but yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that we would look at, but I'm encouraged by the fact that at least the Department of Health is thinking about this now, and that hopefully we're getting closer to vaccinating our educators. But no hard dates at this point. So that's sort of the process on that.
Nice.
So questions about reopening and next phase and all that stuff?
Yes, I have a question. I have a comment about that lottery system for the vaccines, which seems incredibly unfair to put the burden on the district to select 25% when way more wanted. Did the county indicate how long it would remain at 25%? I
No.
mean, was it for like 2 weeks and then the next 25% are allowed to be vaccinated?
They did not give me any indication on that.
It sounds.
Yeah, I share your shaking of the head.
Opposite tribute.
Yeah.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yeah, I just want to stay in the moment for a second, which is this idea of bringing kids and everybody back to school. So, I think the one thing I want to make sure we're kind of being real about is that, we're unsure a little bit about what the future holds, right? And that as a district, we have some rules and policies that we want to make sure people are adhering to. So one is I want to just, applaud the people who are staying to those policies, right? If you're out of the tri-state area, you're supposed to quarantine, and people doing that voluntarily. If you have kids that are sick, you're keeping them home, right? So I applaud those people and the staff and the parents who are doing that voluntarily. The thing we just have to really be vigilant about is that this is all about self-monitoring. And if we're not going to self-monitor ourselves, then we're going to put ourselves in harm's way about really being able to open up school. So if you're going to go out of state, whether you're a teacher or a faculty member or a parent, you got to quarantine. You got to stay away from school, right? I would advise that people really take this next month and make sure you don't have big congregations of people and parties, because a lot of the things that are occurring are stemming from that.
Mhm.
And if we're not going to self-regulate, then we're going to have a bigger problem, right? And all these things we're trying to do about getting ourselves back to a better norm by, March 16th and trying to figure out how to do this, it's all going to be out the window. And also, just to remember, as a board and as a district, we really have very few abilities to enforce some of these rules,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So it really can't be the onus on the district to figure out how to actually enforce this. So we need the help of everybody to enforce that. So if you see something, say something. If you're giving advice to a friend, push the party off to the spring, right? If you're going skiing out in
Summer's
the area,
better. Summer is better.
that's right, figure out a way to be safe than sorry, right? Because we don't
Absolutely.
want this to prolong itself,
Um,
because we really don't know how it's all gonna turn out.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, just about every letter I send home speaks to this and, we've certainly stressed it, but you're absolutely right. The only thing that we can do as a school district, the only thing we have the authority to do as a school district is to exclude a child or an adult from school. We can't force them to quarantine at home. We can't force them to not leave their homes. That's the only, I mean, we can suggest it, we can tell, but there's literally nothing we can do outside of our school activities and our
Right, so
classrooms.
so I just want to say, if we're all gonna say we're all in this together, then I just think we gotta walk that talk, right? And make sure we're all in this together, right? And if we're gonna do that, let's make sure we're all kind of self-regulating each other. So all the parents that are listening, all the teachers, we gotta all kind of band together, because this month is really a determining month,
It's true.
right? Okay?
Yep.
That's all I wanted to say.
Dr.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr.
Jim? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shawanda.
Hi, Shawanda Beal here. So a question. So the plan is to increase the students' return at some point in March, right before spring break. And then, assuming some people will travel, will there be a plan to then have schools or the entire district on all remote post spring break?
We have not had that conversation at this point. That's not to say it wouldn't happen, but we have not had that conversation as a task force or as an administration.
You may want to consider that.
I saw Ms. Gilman.
So when you rolled out these schedules to the task forces in the intermediate school and the high school, and you said that you had these conversations and that the schedules would have to be modified, perhaps. So you're talking about possibly eliminating lunches and having students go for long periods in the classroom to circumvent the lunches. How was that received by the staff members?
I think, obviously, staff members have different various opinions about what the schedule will be. That's exactly the process that we're going through right now, is to try to ascertain what we ultimately think is going to be the best thing for the students and the best thing for the school environment as a whole. So, I think Ms. Kasuba and Mr. Amato have presented, the possibilities. And there's other considerations, because there's transportation to consider if the times change. There's food distribution that would probably have to be altered a little bit to grab and go lunches as kids leave, if we're no longer serving lunch in the day itself. I mean, we would still feed kids, but the nature of it would change. We would still do our Wednesday distributions. So there's just some logistics that have to be worked out depending on what the schedule would be. And that's why the planning has to be done now, so that when the time comes, we know exactly, what we're faced with. I mean, the other thing to consider is that right now, so few kids are, like the high school and the middle school are two very different beasts. The majority of kids are coming to the middle school every day. The high school, on the other hand, the majority of the kids are not coming to the high school every day. So, if we got 50% of the kids who said, okay, at the high school, we said, okay, I want to come back, I don't know that we'd necessarily have to modify the schedule, because we planned for 50% from the start of the year. So that would just take us back to where we were in September. We could accommodate 50% without having to necessarily change a lot. But, when Dawn did her student survey, she found that about 60 to 65% of the kids said if their grade level were to come back, we would want to come back. So based on those numbers, we think that we'd probably have to modify the schedule.
And how about social distancing? If 60 to 65% of the high school kids come back, how will you be able to social distance? I mean, that's one of the CDC guidelines, that if schools come back full on, that social distancing and masks have to be enforced. Those rooms are not amenable.
Yeah, and that's where the schedule modifications would need to come into play, so that social distancing,
Well,
especially during times when masks could not be on for eating, et cetera. That's why schedule modifications would
Right.
have to be.
and there's certainly no doubt that if more kids come back in the classrooms, that, you know, there could be some rooms, absolutely, where being able to maintain 6 feet at all times is not going to be as possible. That exists at the elementary schools right now and has not proven to be, you know, a significant problem in terms of spread of virus. But we have plexiglass, we wear face masks, there's other things that we can put in place to help mitigate, you know, that situation. So, you know, that there's no doubt that 6 feet will be compromised in some way. But, you know, the thing to remember is it's not like, you know, 6 feet is safe and 5 feet is unsafe. It's more of a level of risk, obviously, right? So if you're 9 feet from someone, the level of risk is very low. If you're 6 feet from someone, the level of risk increases, but still could be okay. You get to 3 feet, the level of risk is higher. The person, of course, on the other end of that 3 feet has to be infected with COVID and has to be putting it out there into the environment. So, you know, it speaks to, yes, does bringing back more kids increase the level of risk? It certainly does. However, where we've seen in schools, not across in our own school district, across New Jersey, and really across the nation, that where that environment exists, it has not led to significant spread of the virus.
We'll go to Ms. Hayes, who I believe had a question.
I have a few comments. So, and just so I can maybe understand, I don't know if it's the science or if it's how we came to this decision, but so the elementary schools eat in their classrooms, correct? So how is the middle school different in terms of eating? Like, why do we want to not have the middle schoolers eat, but the elementary kids can eat in their classrooms and have breakfast and lunch?
It's a question of the volume of number of kids that it would be, and just being able to put them, you know, putting the kids in the, you know, being able to physically go. There's more kids who avail themselves of the school lunches. It just logistically, it becomes a much more difficult process to do.
But in the elementary schools, aren't we still splitting between the classrooms and the cafeteria?
We do,
and other
yes.
spaces? So a lot of
Yes.
classes are reduced by some percentage, whether it's half or more or less. For some
Correct.
kids are in the classroom, and then some go to the cafeteria, and they typically are alternating.
Yeah, like so it's a difference of who's.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I think I brought this up at when we closed the middle school. I'm a little wondering why we can't have a little bit of a coordination with the rec department when we close our schools. For like when we closed the middle school recently, you know, that night there was grades 4 through 8 basketball or something. And I understand there are privacy issues with, we can't say, you know, these kids are on quarantine, this kid is out because they're positive or mom's positive. But it just seems like we should be working together at a minimum, like maybe not the club sports, I can understand because that's kind of separate, but town rec rents from us and they have our students. So how is that, do you think that's possible that we can have some sort of collaboration?
Well, we do. I mean, they do get our communications. They do know when our schools close. I did speak to Mike Patrico about this issue last week, and you know, we are of the same mind. They, you know, we know what ultimately the other is doing. That's they monitor what we're doing. They get our correspondence. And ultimately, their position is that they rely on the people who have to quarantine to do so, and it's ultimately their decision as to whether they want to run their programs despite what we are doing. It's their call, and that's how they would that's how they would like to do it. But we do communicate, they do know what's going on in the schools. To your point, and it's true that we can't say, this child needs to quarantine, this child needs to quarantine, this child needs to quarantine due to the privacy rules. So when we tell a child, okay, you have to quarantine, we rely, as kind of getting back to Mr. Weinstein's point, people have to be responsible and do the right and responsible thing and keep their children home. Ultimately, what the rec department decides to do is up to them.
Okay, my last question was in the most recent survey we asked parents, would you, when do you want to send your kids back more? And one of the options was when there were a lot more vaccine teachers, a lot more teachers took vaccines. So, and just what you were saying, you don't know if you can ask. Is there a way, maybe by the next meeting, if we can find out, is this something legally, is this something that we can work with the union about? I would think that teachers would want folks to know that they got vaccinated. If I could be wrong. If my kid's teacher got vaccinated, I would be more comfortable sending them to school. But if we're asking parents, would you be more comfortable if teachers were vaccinated and we don't have a mechanism of finding out if teachers are and staff are being vaccinated? I think that it's a little incongruous. Like, how are we going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I can check with our attorneys on that. My feeling is that would, I don't know that we could ask that I don't know that we could get that information, but I'll certainly inquire.
But how do we ask parents, would you be more comfortable if your teachers were vaccinated? Oh, but by the way, we have no idea of knowing that.
I think it would be an aggregation of the number of total staff who are vaccinated, leading to an overall comfort with the vaccine. So I think it's
maybe we could do that.
To say that,
yeah, 50% of our staff, 80% of our
but
staff.
unless an individual is willing to self-profess that they were vaccinated.
And I would never want to put someone in the position where they would have to feel, because there are definitely going to be people who are going to not feel comfortable with getting vaccinated. And so, we don't want to put our folks in a position where they have to feel that pressure to either get vaccinated if they don't want to, or, profess that they did or didn't.
Sure.
Did vaccinations come up during the meeting with Dave Henry and the staff last week?
Yeah, we talked, and that was before I got our directive, but we did talk a little bit about vaccinations. Also, the high school staff had a meeting with that Dawn set up with the folks, I think, from Barnabas Health that talked about vaccination. So, yeah, it's been a big topic of conversation.
Ms. Tortorella?
Yeah, I mean, you should. I can't think of a reason. It's not a HIPAA violation to ask. It's a HIPAA violation to say, yes, Natalie Tortorello works here and she has the vaccine. It's not a violation to ask the question, as long as it's not required that they answer yes or no. They have to have the opt-out answer, and then there's no reason not to ask. I mean, I've done this with my employees. We have legal consult. There's no reason. It's, as long as you keep it voluntary, you can.
And you use that information anonymously, right? Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't say like, yes, Janice and Natalie, I'm speaking hypothetically,
Okay.
Janice and Natalie had it,
I wish.
Jim and Ken didn't.
Right.
You could say,
I think,
of self-identifying, 40% had it,
right.
20 didn't, and 40 declined to
I think
answer.
that's something that we would just have to work with our association.
Yeah,
and
sure.
just put it together to where people felt comfortable and
Yeah, I think there's a way to do that,
understood the
though.
rationale as to why we're asking the
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
Okay, any other questions on that part? I got a couple other.
No, I don't see any.
Okay. So I just wanted to give a quick update on preschool. We are coming up, we're about a month away from our preschool lottery. We have the other night, Thursday night, we had a preschool parent information session in 2 languages, and it went very well. We had about 60, 70 parents on that information session. To date, we have just shy of 90 applications for our programs. So we're excited. We're well on our way to be filling those new spots. So that should be going very well. Another quick thing, we're very excited this past week that the Department of Education did put out their guidance that we will be moving forward with state testing this year. No comment on that, other than I think it's completely ridiculous. But other than that, I will make no comment.
Just going back to preschool for a second. We have
Yes.
90 applications and how many slots so that people have a sense of where that,
Yeah, we presented it. It's two classes, 3-year-old at Wanamasa, and the presentation is going to go up on the website. But 20 spots, 3-year-old at Wanamasa and Dow, 30 spots at Wayside because they have one more 3-year-old section, and then it's 20. There's 10 spots. Forgive me. There'll be some spots at Wanamasa and Dow. No 4-year-old at Wayside, just because those kids graduate up to those sections. So we have more applications right now than the spots.
20 plus 20 plus 10 plus 10.
Yeah, no, I was trying to figure it out.
Right?
Yeah.
I think I,
Divide by 4,
plus
carry the 3. But yeah, there's
That's not common for math, Doctor.
And
yeah.
when will that presentation be put on the line?
It should be up very soon. I will follow up, but it should be up very soon, within the next day or so.
Okay.
But I just did want to mention the state testing situation. We are moving forward, no waiver at this point. We spend a lot of time here talking about state tests and the importance of state tests and the issues surrounding state tests. It's certainly my feeling at this point, based on what all these children have been through over the past year, to engage them and expect anything significant out of our current state testing is a tall order. So I'll say that. And the last thing we just wanted to mention was there was a question that came up last week about grants and about the different grants that we have applied for in the last couple of years. I think we've posted that up on the
Yeah,
docs.
correct. Mary Ann, if you could share the screen, please. It's the attachment right after the superintendent's report.
So just quickly, we'll give a sort of a quick overview. We as a district, and we've said this before, have been extremely successful in,
The other one, Mary Ann, sorry,
we've also been successful with that, whatever that was.
that's the learning loss.
Oh, the learning loss grant, okay. Yeah, so this gives you an idea of just over the past couple of years, the type of grants that we've applied for. Some of these are, like our IDEA grants and our Title I grants. Those are typically not rollover, but ones that we apply for each year that are not competitive grants. Some of these others have been competitive grants. So for example, our Career Pathways grant, which was a 5-year grant, was $500,000. Our preschool grant, which at least in the initial year was competitive, but now continues to be a grant that we take advantage of. We're going to be upwards of over $3 million there. The computer science grant for $75,000 that we got a couple of years ago. The Rutgers RTI grant, that while that was not a lot of money, about $3,000, the PD and what that's provided to us for our response to intervention and our interventions has been priceless. So Ken, I want to talk some about some of the other sort of more your category grants.
Yeah, and there are also donations on this list, as you see. So, and this list was just from July 1st, 2019, so we didn't go all the way back. But there's a variety of different grants and donations on there. And just to note, on the agenda tonight, we will discuss another one that's not on this list yet. And then also, for some reason, I missed the electric busing grant buses that we submitted. So that's another one to add to this list that we have under pending applications, and we expect March or into May to hear something about that application. So we've been busy trying to do as much as we can. So it's a good thing.
Ken, can I ask, and Dr. Stepankowitz actually, maybe more appropriately, for things like, grants that we're applying to for the state, like electric buses, right? That's the state granting program you're referring to, right? That one?
Right.
Do we engage our elected legislators to write letters of support and weigh in on some of those competitive grants to the state? Because I think that could be helpful for some of those if we were to consider that.
We have not, but we certainly could do that if you think that would help.
I don't think it could hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been my understanding that the folks who read those grants and make those decisions are not supposed to consider those kinds of things, but it can't hurt. I mean, we can do it. They can always say we're not going to consider it. But, yeah, sure, I can absolutely do that.
And just another note, I think this Board of Education and past boards of education have been very good. Is whenever they see something, they send it to us, and it doesn't always work out. You know, some grants are filled with conditions and things that aren't possible or really benefit the person giving a few $1,000s, but you have to you have to look at both sides of the ledger, so to say. So that's something, but it as we're talking about, it never hurts to look at it and to sometimes even to apply for it, even though there may be a small chance that we may get it or may not get it due to our demographic makeup, for instance. But it's all good information and good things to try.
Can't win unless you play. Can't win unless you play.
Can't win unless we play. That's true. I'm looking to see Grace, Ms. Talarico.
I have one question. Are any of these grants like annual grants? Do we get this money yearly?
For some, like for example, IDEA, we get yearly. Title I, we get yearly. The CARES grant was obviously based on COVID, so hopefully we will not be getting that yearly. The Career Pathways was a 5-year grant that's actually ending this year. Perkins is a yearly grant. So it's a combination. I would say it's a combination of things that are one time with some things that are recurring. Or if not every year, we're occurring over, a 3 to 5 year period.
Ms. Hayes.
Ken, in the pending applications, are all those, like, when will we find out? Are all these in the next 6 weeks we'll find out, or, maybe not till September?
I know the Shea grant is March because I've dealt with that one. The preschool PEA,
Yeah.
That's when we get our state aid notices, when it's officially
Right. I mean, we've
granted to us,
basically been approved for that. It's just, that we're in the phase now. Like I said, the first year was competitive. Now, as long as basically the application is approved by the state, that, we get that funding. So that shouldn't be, we would have heard probably by now if there was a problem with our application. So we expect to be able to get that funding. Perkins is a federal grant that, we typically, as long as you meet the criteria, should be able to get that because it's based on your career technical education students, of which we, have many at the high school. Just looking, the tiered systems that, we should be getting that. That's pretty much, that should be pretty much a done deal. And then, of course, we just applied for the student learning loss grant. And I think that comes through, I want to say that's supposed to start April 1. So we should be finding out about that relatively soon.
and that's the other that's the other attachment on there, was that grant application.
Right.
that
The
there
board
was a
requested
request
to see that application.
Have we ever considered hiring a grant writer for, it seems like we do a lot. And who is our main grant writer? Ms. Weldon?
All of us engage in grants. I think that, it depends on the grant. We're all involved. And, for a district our size, we I don't know that we've really considered it, but I will tell you that we've been very successful in doing what we do. So I don't know if we should mess with it. We get a lot of grants and we've done very well. So, but, one thing that we may be able to do is, if we approve our community information officer this tonight, and as that role expands, that may be something that we could consider having that person help us with as well.
Some
We
mission
had
creep
somebody
there.
doing that. We had somebody writing grants, like, what,
Yeah.
maybe 5?
Yeah, the
6 years
special
ago?
projects, that position.
Right,
we
that
reduced.
position.
It was an administrative
Right.
position that we
Right.
reduced.
Most, like Newark has a grant writer for their, obviously we're not Newark, but it sounds like we do a lot. And maybe we can get more if we had a dedicated person, who only does that. I'm sure you all have other things to do sometimes. A lot.
Yeah, and I think you would have to figure out the balance between the amount of inputs that would be needed from the administration anyway to the grant
Yeah.
writer and how much work it could take from you, but, seeing that balance.
Right.
Because of the,
Sure. Mhm.
the data that's needed and the level of expertise that is,
Mhm.
there are good grant writers out there for sure.
Yep.
Good firms. Looking to see any other questions on grants for Dr. Stefankiewicz? See any other board members? Okay. Anything else, Dr. Stefankiewicz? or does
No,
conclude
that
your
is, I'm good for now. I'm sure I'll think of something later.
I had a quick question about the new, trying to increase the times at the middle and the high school. If the kids are going like, more, what is it, 7 a.m. to like 1 or so and no lunch, if that's what we're trying to do. I think you said that for, what was that, the high school? Or was that for both? Do they get snack breaks?
Yeah, we would be able to provide some time. Like right now, the schools do mass breaks. They, there's, and if I'm not mistaken, TIS right now does some snack breaks in their day. So we can incorporate, wellness break, snack, whatever break you want to call it. We can incorporate those into the day and make sure that kids, because we do recognize for some of these kids, it could be certainly a longer period of time than what they're used to as far as, eating. So we want to make sure they have the
and part
ability
of the
to do it.
conversation too is determining what Sodexo would be able to supply in terms of snacks
Right.
for.
Well, and what we come to find is, whatever they would do would really have to fall under what would be permissible through the breakfast or lunch program. So they could be, what they could potentially do is provide things in the breakfast program that the students would be able to
Right.
carry. And it's free right now for everybody, so everybody could avail themselves of that.
Any other?
Right. It's like, well, one thing, it's not like a meal break. Kids aren't, we joke that it's not like pull out like a rack of ribs and eat ribs. It's like a granola bar or a Pop-Tart or something like that. That's true. Well, it could be a brisket flavored Pop-Tart, but I don't know.
Dr. Stefankiewicz, back to the grant for learning loss, that $156,000. How many of those grants are available? How many districts?
I want to say it's 16.
16.
Statewide,
I
yes.
read through our plans, should we win that grant, and hopefully we will, to use toward employing several staff members, but I was looking to see if our summer school programs would be extended to make up for any learning loss. Are we planning to expand our summer school program should we receive this grant?
Yeah, I think we're looking at summer, we're looking at after school, we're looking at all different opportunities to be able to help, those students who are in the greatest need. So yeah, all of those opportunities would be taken advantage of.
Thank you.
Seeing no other hands. Thank you, Dr. Stefankiewicz.
Thank you.
No. I had a quick question. Was this the only time to talk about that grant, or are we going back to that grant later? The learning loss one.
It is. We can talk about it
Whatever you
now.
wanna
We
do.
might
I
as well
thought we were
work
having a
on
presentation, but we're not.
that grant specifically.
Yeah. It's just the.
No, we're not
Just the
Okay,
application.
I misunderstood it. I thought we were having a presentation, so I don't have my notes organized, so I'll wait till the end and I'll probably ask the question.
Okay, and we'll see your questions, but we have to remain mindful that we as the board can't write that grant, right? So we can ask questions for sure, but
No, and it's already been submitted, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
So we have questions about it, but yeah, if you have them now, we can go to it now, or if not, we can come back to it later on.
no, I don't have them ready now.
Okay, so then we'll move to Mr. Janarone.
Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to skip my report, but I will introduce a couple of professionals we have with us tonight. So we'll skip around a little bit on the agenda. First, we're going to go to our 8.3 under financial resources. We have our independent auditors with us from Smolin and Lupin. We have Laura Di Tomaso and Scott Bumbernick with us, and they're going to give everybody wave. And they're going to give a little report on the June 30th, 2020 school audit we've talked about the last few meetings and how it was delayed a little bit, but it's finally here. So, but before I introduce you, Laura, and you guys can unmute yourselves, Laura and Scott, I do want to introduce Shannon Carey. I don't know if Shannon, you say hello, Shannon, please. So,
hello, good evening, board
there you go.
members.
Shannon Carey is the new assistant school business administrator who handles the majority of the work on the audit. If you remember, the previous assistant business administrator, Mr. George Stone, had been with us for over 18 years and has just recently retired. And Shannon has been had the inevitable job of jumping in midst of crazy times and trying to pick up everything. And she's done a great job so far. It hasn't been easy, but she's been doing great. So I just wanted to introduce Shannon. And she was hoping to come in person to meet many of the board members, but due to the snow, it wasn't possible. So Laura, I'll throw it over to you and take it from there.
All right, it's nice to see you all. And see faces that were some of my children's teachers and coaches, so that's always good to see. Actually, back to the grants. If you look at the audit report on pages 129 and 130, every year we have a schedule of all the federal and state grants that are received by the board. And audit, basically part of our audit is reviewing the major grants and looking to make sure that the resources are used for the application as it is approved. So that's just, if you look, you can see it doesn't include some of the outside grants that you receive, but it does include all the federal and state grants. So, and most of those are received every year. So the, you know, I think a lot of that information that you're looking for is in the audit report. So we thank Ken and Shannon for their help during the audit. Shannon, again, she picked up schedules that George Stone did seamlessly for 18 years, and it's very difficult to pick up something, someone else's logic. And some of them were in the middle of being prepared, so that's really difficult to do. So we do appreciate her work during the audit and picking up where George left off. So I guess what we'd like to start with is what Ken wanted. There's a lot of new board members, so Ken wanted us to give you maybe a little bit of insight into how what the audit really entails. And Scott, I don't know if you want to unmute and maybe talk about how we assess risk and some of the testing that we do, and we'll do it.
Sure. I thought I'd start with, what the purpose of the audit actually is. So the purpose of the audit is to issue an opinion as to whether the financial statements are free of material misstatements. Now, we talk about the financial statements, and the financial statements and their preparation and their presentation, according to the accounting standards, is really the responsibility of management. And regarding that, they also create internal controls to make sure there are no misstatements, whether due to error, fraud, or whatever in the financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to, like I said, come up with an opinion whether the statements are in line with the accounting standards. And the standards require that we plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that there are no misstatements in the financial statements. So we do that by assessing risk. That's really the big part of the audit. From our end, we address the areas that are risky to the financial statements that could be easily manipulated or misstated.
And you as a board, I'm sorry to interrupt, Scott, But you as a board, because of the oversight that you have over the administration and the approval process that you have, you're a very important part of the internal control assessment. The fact that those controls are there.
Exactly. And so when we're assessing our risk, we have to evaluate whether the proper controls are in place, whether that's approvals, segregation of duties, oversight, monitoring. Those are some of the internal control issues that we look at. And that allows us to design procedures to allow us to get enough audit evidence that we can support the numbers and the disclosures in the financial statements. And the objective is to, lower the risk that there is a misstatement. So the more riskier areas there are, the more work we do to make sure that they're properly stated. For example, the revenue for the financial statements in this case is not very risky, right? Because it's state aid, and the money comes right into the bank account, or it's real estate taxes that are coming from the municipality. So, and when we're doing our risk assessment, we're looking at the financial statements overall, not just an individual transaction that may have happened. So in some of our testing, we do a sample, meaning we only look at a certain population, a certain sample of the population to do our testing. We don't look at everything. And in conjunction with, us designing our procedures to lower the risk, in this case with a school district, the state of New Jersey gives us a whole guide of, things to test. Now, most of those things are compliance related, and they related to like bid testing, that we reviewed bids that were necessary. We review POs, make sure they are properly approved and within the budgetary limits. And we also evaluate estimates. So like compensated absences, depreciation lives for the fixed assets, things like that are estimates. And we make sure that those are proper and the reporting in the financial statement is proper. So after all said and done, all those procedures that we did for this year's audit, we were able to issue an unmodified opinion, which basically means there's no findings and there's no misstatements noted. And we were able to do that based on our testing and the evidence that we obtained. So that's basically an overview of a financial statement audit and the objective that we're trying to reach. Let's see.
If you
So
wanted
we-
to share an attachment, Scott, just let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Laura, if you want to get into the financial statements in detail, yeah, if you want to share the presentation, it's slide number 7.
All right, now where do I see that?
Mary Ann, if you could share that. Share the screen, please.
Do you see the review of audited financial statements?
You know what? I saw it and now it's gone. It was out the bottom, but now I'm not seeing it. Do I have to go into?
Should appear on your screen. She should be able to share the screen.
If I share the screen, okay, I've got it. I think. Oh, no, I don't see it. I just see our agenda here.
Who has the document?
Mary Ann's doing it. So Laura, you don't need to do anything. Mary Ann's trying to
Okay.
get it to share. So we might have to give her a minute to figure this out.
Ken, what do you see now?
I see.
It's the agenda.
Just the agenda?
Yeah, it's not the attachment.
Okay, hold on.
I did place it under administrative attachments also, if that's easier.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Do you see that now?
I do.
Yep.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. We have, I guess I'm not sure how to start this, but anyway, there's 136 pages basically of data and notes in our audit report. But the big thing is, what is our fund balance? And if you look at the financial statements, you're going to say there's A schedules, B schedules, and C schedules, and they all show a different fund balance. And that's because they're all there for different purposes. So the ones that you use for budgetary basis are the Fund Cs. They're the ones that are really, really the most important to you. The ones that are the As are things that are accounting standards. Your schedules are accounting standards. They require us to include. And the B schedules, they're the C schedules modified by one thing, which I'll tell you. So anyway, the C schedules, we have our fund balance. So the C1, that basically shows all the revenue that was budgeted, the revenue that was actual, and the variance. So we come to a fund balance recap. And this recap reflects the amount of fund balance that we can retain, as well as the fund balance that is going to be appropriated in the next years, in the 2021-22 budget that you will be basically using for tax relief. So what I did is on this page that's here, I have our figures for 2019 and our figures for 2020. So out of our fund balance on the budgetary basis of about $11 million, we had encumbrances. Those are expenses that are rolled over into the next year because either we didn't receive a lot of it is custodial supplies because we weren't getting the sanitizer that we ordered and things like that. The $2.9 million is your capital reserve plus the maintenance reserve that you approved in June. So that's $2,900,000. Excess surplus from the prior year, that's in your 2020-21 budget. So that's $3,255 that you've already appropriated to this current year. We're coming up with a calculation of $3,600,000 that you're going to be appropriating in the budget that you're working on now. What we're left with basically is undesignated $1,796,000. And that is the most that we can retain as fund balance because we're limited to 2% of our general fund expenditures in what we can retain. Everything else has to basically be either reserved or returned to the taxpayers as tax relief in the budget. So that's, I know, something that's very important to all of you as you're going through this budget process now. And fortunately, I know Ken is always very interested in what this number is going to be because, for future planning, what's going into reserve, what's going into relief to stay within the caps that you have and how much that you can increase your budget in any given year. The other thing, let's see, what is on? Can I move these pages on this screen or no?
Just let Mary Ann know she has control. The moderator has control. So you can just tell her to go to the next page or.
All right. On page, let's go to the next page, Mary Ann, if you would. There's some new accounting pronouncements that are coming up. And the most pertinent one is the fiduciary fund. The fiduciary fund is made up of a few things. It's the student activity fund. The student activity fund right now is considered, it's not considered the board money. It's considered basically money that we're holding in trust. And accounting standards have said we cannot no longer account for it in that manner. So that is going to work similar to the money that we get for federal and state financial assistance that is restricted. So like IDEA money, ESEA money, those special projects are considered, we call it Fund 20. It's our special revenue fund. So the student activity funds will now be in that. The money, the unemployment money that we have reserved, that's always never been part of the regular financial statement. It's just a separate fund because it's basically money in trust. That is going to be reflected on the school balance sheet now as an asset and as a liability. Initially, we were concerned that if there's fund balances there, what we can retain, but now we have been told that those funds can be considered restricted funds, similar to our capital reserve, our maintenance reserve. And then we have another standard that we're going to have to implement in next year, and that's on leases. For the most part, we've been capitalizing leases. When there were copiers that were purchased in this past year for about $140,000 under a lease, and we don't expense that as we have monthly payments. We capitalize it just as if we were to have a purchase a fixed asset and have a loan. So that's really basically any lease. Now, if we were to lease a vehicle or a piece of equipment, you know, that normally would be an operating lease. I mean, many of us have car leases now. Say the board would have a car lease, that would have to be capitalized. So that's what that standard's all about. Or if we rented space, which we don't. So I don't think this will affect us that much, but the new standard on the fiduciary activities will change the report. So I explained about the C fund balance. That's what we budget on. If you go from the C to the B schedule, which I think is in our audit synopsis, Marianne, if you want to pull that up. And if you go to the next page. You can keep going. I'm gonna look at the bottom. So here's all the designations of fund balance. If you see, okay, you can go back, yeah. What I'm looking at is the numbers, the liabilities in the fund balance. I'd like to just explain that. If you look, we have a fund balance deficit of $76,000. So you wonder, how do we get to a fund balance deficit when I just told you that you have $1,700,000, that's what you can retain. State of New Jersey did some funny accounting a long time ago now, where they deferred our last state aid payment. Then they deferred our last 2 state aid payments. So what happens is there's $1.8 million of state aid that we booked that we were supposed to receive in the year 2000 that we did not receive until after the fiscal year end. And the state did not book that liability. So we can't book that receivable. So that's why it shows that we have a deficit in our fund balance here of about $76,000 when the other schedules show that we have $1.7 million. So that's just, and then if you look at the A exhibits, which I don't have presented here, but if you look at all these different items that are reconciling items just below this, on the A schedules, fixed assets are booked, the liability to PERS, so the pension liability for PERS is booked on our financial statements. That's basically, it comes out to $22,000 of a liability that's booked on the A schedules. along with all of our bonds and compensated absences. So monies that are going to be raised by taxes in future years and paid in future years. But on the A schedules, those are all reflected. The fixed assets are there and all the liabilities are presented as well, which are not reflected on any other statements. So that looks like we have a $26 million deficit in our unrestricted fund balance. So it doesn't make a lot of sense if you're not familiar with why and how all these schedules flow together, but they all end up reconciling and balancing. And in the audit report, there's all different reconciliation schedules to show you how you get to each one. And then we have just a couple of comments we made to Ken. Nothing goes to the level of a recommendation for us to put in the audit report. But I think there's just 3 things that I thought that we could discuss. And that's not here, Mary Ann. That goes back to the other slide that we were looking at before, the next page from the accounting pronouncements, I believe.
Yep, the next one.
Right. So,
Okay.
As you know, you have a prescription plan, right? Self-insured prescription plan. And we've accumulated a little over $1 million in there. And our claims run somewhere around $250,000 a month. So we've always felt that 3 months of claims is a good amount of balance to have. And now there's a little bit of an overage there. So we talked to Ken about considering that in the budget coming up, maybe adjusting that, and that'll give you maybe a little bit of room for something else that's needed. In the cafeteria account, there are students owe money to the cafeteria account, and the balance has gotten a little large. So we asked Ken to review that, and maybe I think there's some students that are no longer with the district, and they'll be written. Ken's going to take a look and write them off. There was a lot of cleanup this year, but I think there could be more cleanup in that. And of course, it wasn't material for us to make any journal entries to write anything off, but just something that we told Ken and Shannon to take a look at for the coming year. And then in the student activity fund, we talked about risk. So where is risk? Risk is, if you look in the newspapers every once in a while, student activity is like the area of risk because there is a lot of transactions that some of them are cash, some are checks, but we don't have the control over those funds like we do over the general fund, where we know we have the state aid and the real estate taxes. So what we found was some of the deposits were not made timely. So we just feel that management should reiterate the importance of depositing those funds on a timely basis. I think with the pandemic, maybe some time went by where people were not able to go to the school and make the deposit and get there was probably some issues there due to the pandemic and school being closed, but some of this occurred before the pandemic. So we just felt it was important to educate everyone again, to be mindful that we don't want to have any funds laying around that are not deposited. I think the policy is 48 hours, if I'm not mistaken, Ken. So, so those are just 3 issues we brought up with Ken where we feel that the, things that should be reviewed. Does anyone have any questions? It's different presenting remotely. Yes, I feel like I lost some of my consistency.
Thank you for that, Laura. Any board members with questions for Laura or Scott or Ken?
Hi, it's Shawanda Beal. A question, you mentioned that funds from the prescription plan could be moved. Are there limitations to that transfer? I think, so what you've been doing is basically, once it's in that fund,
it's in that fund to pay claims. So it's just a question of normally been budgeting a certain amount per year and then funding based on that budget. So we're just saying, let's review the budget, and maybe it doesn't have to be, I think maybe some of the, I don't know if claims have gone down, but maybe the budget is just a little too high, or maybe it's just stabilized. So we just feel that there's been money accumulated in there, so you can reduce the budget in the year coming up.
Yeah, I think we have done better with claims, and that goes back to some of the benefit levels that we were able to achieve with the union participation. So that it's something that we can certainly lower the budgeted amount for the 21-22 school year, which is a good thing, because then that'll free up those funds to move to another budget line for something else, or to make up for the loss in state aid and some of the other things we'll talk about under my report later in the meeting. And if any board member wants to go through the 136 pages, we're not going to do it tonight. Don't worry. Don't worry. But more than happy to go through it. Those are I know everybody doesn't enjoy this as much as Shannon and I do, but we can always sit down and go through any of the schedules with you, or any member of the public for that matter. I've done that in the past, so we can certainly do that. Thank you, Laura, and Scott, for sharing that with us.
Scott. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay. And yes, thank you,
I'm
Shannon.
impressed that, being here for many years, the recommendations have sometimes been high. So I'm impressed that in a transitional year that we didn't have so many. So I think that's a testament to you and Shannon, and to, our team here. And I just think that's
Absolutely.
Yes. And it goes, there's a whole staff that
Of course,
that does the, majority of the work for payroll, accounts payable. The whole business office staff does a great job, and many of them have been here for a good amount of time, and they do excellent work.
And I have to tell you, when we have questions, when we think there could be something that's not right, George and Ken especially are very, very concerned. So I know that they're looking before we get in to make sure that everything is proper. So, and they do that on an ongoing basis all year. So I think you can have you should have a lot, we have very good, we feel that you have good controls, and we just feel that you have a great staff there that do make the audit have very few recommendations.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Okay, for our next professional presentation, we have Sandy Nicastro from Strauss Esme Associates, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Weinstein, the chair of the new chair of the newly constructed policy committee.
The newly minted policy
Right.
committee.
To do the intro and take it from here.
Great.
Mr. Weinstein?
Thanks, Ken. So we had our discussion last week, and part of the discussion was, okay, what's the strategy, what's the plan kind of going forward around the policy committee, and what's the process? And so myself, Ken, and Sandy had a good conversation the other day, and we kind of talked about where we think we are, and how we want to approach it. And so I believe the process that we're going to go through is Sandy and her team are basically going to do an audit of our policies, and they're going to pull out the policies that they believe are either antiquated, need to be reviewed, need some updating. We haven't had an audit like this, I guess, in some time. And so from that audit, she's going to work with our committee and walk us through those policies and those things that should be looked at. And then as a committee, we'll look at those first and then figure out how we want to proceed with that. And in Sandy's diligence in thinking through this, we thought that we would be able to have, some look at that by the end of the month. And so that's the kind of process we're going to go through, is have her do the audit, and figure out, the things that we should look at, and then we'll meet as a committee and then kind of take it from there. Sandy is going to give a little bit of a discussion now about the types of things that she does, but I think basically the thing that I feel comfortable with in our discussion is she's our eyes and ears and our watchdog around the 10 to 15 or so policies that we get alerted to that we have to address. So we look to her and her team to basically notify us of those policies. So I feel like once we get our current audit done and then look at the policies that we have in place, I think that the cadence is that as she's alerted to those policies that need to be refreshed, then she'll work with Ken, who will then work with our committee to be able to discuss those policies. So I think I hope I have everything from that meeting that I remember. Did I do that? Okay, Ken?
Well said.
Okay, thanks. Oh, thanks, Sandy.
Just expand on one thing. It was the policy alerts that I know Sandy will discuss. We have like 4 or 5 of them a year, and in each of them, it's 10 or 15 policies. So it's actually 4 times.
Yes.
4 times that.
Right,
so
right.
yeah.
Right.
So it can be a decent, depending on what's going on, a good number of policies each year that will need to be reviewed by the committee and then the board.
Yeah, correct, right. So I think with that, is it okay to turn it over to you, Sandy, and you can kind of talk a little bit?
Yeah.
Maybe take 10 minutes or so to talk about what you and your team are doing and how you work with us?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Great,
Hello, everyone.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Good to go? I'm looking at the Madam President, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Good to go.
Good, yeah, well, thank you for having me, everybody. Just a little bit about what our discussion was the other day with Mr. Janneron and Mr. Weinstein, talking about, the possibility of reviewing your policies, and they just asked how do they go about it, and I said, Strauss Esme does do that service complimentary. So we'll review your policies and your regulations and look at what we consider what needs to be updated. And not that anything busy is going on in the school like COVID, bus drivers, teachers, parents. And what happens often when busy things happen is policies sometimes can take a back seat. And that's very, very, very typical. So for us to do a review, instead of you folks doing it, we'll offer that and go through your policies to make sure what you have is the most current version. Often policies are updated numerous times and our clients say, well, why do you just did this? Why are we doing this again? And often there's a change in a statute, a code, or a law of some sort that revises the original document. For example, the bullying policy we developed back in 2011, we probably had 5 iterations of it based on the changes in the laws. So a district may have the original version, but never subsequently adopted or revised those policies. So they're the kinds of things we'll look at. Once the board goes through all those documents, what we send out and what Strauss Esme does, I should say, Strauss has been around since 1972, and we have 10 full-time people in our office. We're located in Toms River, and we have 2 full-time attorneys. And the reason we change or update policies or regulations are typically based on a statute change or a new statute or a new code that's saying the Board of Education must adopt a policy on X, Y, or Z. The regulations and support that policy in implementing what the policy says. For example, attendance policy. The district must require specific numbers of days. You have to report attendance, and that would be the policy, and the regulation would be specific on how the administrative team implements that policy that the board adopts. So that's kind of the 2-part process. When we send out, Mr. Weinstein mentioned we send out updates throughout the year. We probably send out 4 to 5 updates a year. We call them, I'll hold up my little audio-visual policy alert. And I'm going to show you on the screen in a second. And when we do those policy alerts, we give a reason for the statute or change or what's the purpose of the law. Is it okay? Can I manage my screen here? Yeah. Okay, Laura?
No, you can't, Sandy. For security reasons, we only allow the moderator.
Oh, okay, she said I was going to be able to do that. Okay.
Well, unless she enables you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So anyway, here's my audio visual. We send out these policy alerts, and in the policy alerts, I think Mr. Janneron, it might be our contact. Usually the business administrator's office or the superintendent's office gets these alerts a couple times a year. And in the alerts, we give the reason for the change. And we always say, for example, we just updated the lead testing in water in schools. And the change was based on the change in the law. Typically, the district had to test the water every 6 years in the schools. Now it's changed to every 3 years, starting with 21-22 school year. So that's the reason for the change. And we send out the updates alerting the district they need to do that. Typically administrative staff gets it to the board. The board then looks at the policy, reviews it. Sometimes you can make changes, sometimes you can't, because if it's mandated, typically there's no wiggle room. This is what you have to do. Other things that are district specific, use of school facilities, discipline code, the board can, make some more changes to that. But if it's mandated, you can do more sometimes than what the law requires, but you can never do less than what the law requires.
Can I just jump in for a second? Just for the board members' reference, what Sandy's referring to is when we change policies on the attachments, you have that first attachment usually describes the policy and why it's changing. Does everybody remember seeing that? That's what Sandy's referring to. It gives the rationale as to why and what, and a little summary of what's changing in that policy that we put forward for approval.
Correct. And so we give it really, one paragraph summary. Here's the reason for the change. And then we supply you with a paper, or you can also download it off our website with a bold and strike through text of what is coming in and what's going out and the reason why. So that's how we keep our clients updated. We also send out, that's one way. And also we also send out a monthly newsletter called the New Jersey School Digest. Mr. Weinstein wanted me to mention as well, where we report major decisions affecting education. It could be a commissioner's decision, administrative law judge decision. Sometimes they're dealing with school ethics commission's decision. Sometimes it's teacher tenure. It's an arbitrator's report of a teacher's going up for tenure charges. So that kind of supplements our policy service. So anything that's current or affects education law in New Jersey, we report those cases. And that's another background resource for administrators in the district to kind of see what's going on and how things are functioning legally regarding certain topics. And we always codify those cases to our policy number. So if you're looking up, I'll just use the bullying policy because everybody's probably, unfortunately, familiar with it. Bullying policy, if we have any cases that were reported that a parent appealed a case that the board decided was a HIB policy that ends up going to the commissioner, we report that case and it ties back to that policy. So if someone's looking at the bullying policy, that resource will also give you the result of that case linked to that bullying policy. So that's another resource that we do. I don't want to take too long here. Mr. Weinstein, anything else you want me to discuss? The process that we go through? Oh, I should say, when we do the audit, back to step one, when we do the audit, you may have policies that are dated 2001. And some places say, oh, we want to update our policies every 5 years, other districts. And we'll say, just because it has an older date doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be changed. If there hasn't been a change in the law or the way the district functions, it may still be good, it may still be relevant. However, sometimes you do need to change it, other times you don't need to change it. So just based on the date, when there are changes, we'll send out those alerts. Sometimes our clients say, please stop sending us stuff. We've had enough. And we always say, we're not, just don't kill the messenger. We're the people who just pass along that information and provide it to the districts when something needs to occur as relevant as change in your policy or the practice. And then that reflects in the practice in the district too.
Well, Sandy, thanks for that overview, and one, thanks for all the support that you're giving us. I'm excited about you going through the audit, and thanks for bringing up that service and kind of recommending that. I think that's going to be very valuable to us. So I mean, generally for me, I'm going to wait until we get the audit and for us to kind of caucus. But if my fellow board members want to ask a question or two to you, I'm happy to have them do that.
And perhaps
Okay.
we can start with, Ms. Gilman and Ms. Tallarico, who are on the policy committee, and then we can go from there
Great.
if they have any questions, although I don't, there. Ms. Gilman or Ms. Tallarico? Ms. Tallarico?
I just have one question. So when you review the policies, and you're talking about bylaws too, I assume, right? Both? Okay. So when you review them, do you update the actual bylaw or policy that it was reviewed, even though the body of it hasn't changed because of the law hasn't changed?
I'm not sure if you mean your specific bylaw for Ocean Township's bylaw or just our general?
I'm just talking about in general, because some of our bylaws, you know, it states on them, the last update was 1990. And my concern is, okay, it sounds like they've been reviewed because the law hasn't changed, but that date hasn't been updated. So it makes it look like we haven't looked at it or changed it.
That would be up to
year.
the district if you want to do that on, because you're an online client. So if you wanted to put that somewhere on the bottom of your policies, you know, typically say it's been adopted or revised if it's subsequently revised, but there could be a spot to put reviewed and you could put the date, you know, August 2021 or whatever. I don't think that you could always find a place to put that in there. That's not a bad idea, actually.
I mean, the other thing is too that 3 of us have reviewed all the bylaws for the board, and we came up with 4 pages of just notes that we'd like to share with you, if that's okay with our chairman and the rest of the board.
You want to forward them to me via email? Or they're
Mr. Weinstein?
Sure.
Ken.
And I have them,
Ken has
and I
them.
can forward
Yeah,
them
Ken has
to
them.
to Sandy.
Ken can send
It's
them.
just some like very small specifics, but I think it would be helpful too when you're reviewing just the bylaws. We haven't gotten to the actual policies of the district yet.
Okay, well, you might want to hold off and we can maybe save you a little legwork.
Some time, that would be great.
Yeah, we could save you some legwork and give you somewhere to start. But we'll look at the bylaw questions will give me a feel, or everybody in our office a feel of what you're actually looking for too, which would be helpful.
Okay, I appreciate it, and I look forward to working with you.
Good, I'm here.
Ms. Gilman?
Yes, Eddie, I was going to kind of follow up with Grace Ann, but I also would like to know, is this the first time that you've done an audit for the district, like the one we're requesting now?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. We could have done it years ago, but we do it as a complimentary service, and we don't automatically. We have 550 schools as clients in the state, so unless someone requests to do it, we're happy to do it for people, but we don't actively do these audits for clients unless it's requested, because we will be busy all the time.
I would agree with you and Grace Ann that even though the law hasn't been updated from 1990, that there be a spot for us to put that it was.
I'm losing your audio, Ms. Gilman.
Ms. Gilman, we lost your audio.
Yeah, I think we understood the.
Yeah, I think the idea.
We could talk about that also, about that process.
Yeah, and I think that would be up to the board if you wanted to put that on, but you would have to do them, you know, to each one of your existing policies throughout the whole.
As we go.
That's a lot of policies.
Right,
Yeah.
or we could do as we go
Yeah.
and as we review.
Yeah.
Let's take the first look at the policies that you think we should be looking at. All right, and take that first stab at the ones that you think are most important and might be a little outdated or just needs to be refreshed to today's importance. Okay,
Yeah, perfect. Sounds like a plan.
great. Does anybody else from
Ms. Hayes
From the
has a
board?
question. Ms.
Okay.
Hayes has her hand raised.
Just a quick question, and to echo what Grace Ann said, I think it does sound like a smart idea. And Sandy, you mentioned to possibly put a reviewed end date by, because if we have so many policies that say like 2015, 2011, 1990, it gives the impression to the public that we kind of rubber stamp these and we're okay with them every year to year, in my opinion. So it sounds like we okayed something that's 30 years old. So I love that idea. But I did want to ask, I know you guys also do Long Branch, Sandy.
Yeah.
So can you just give me like a quick synopsis, if it's possible, how ours might differ from a district like Long Branch? If it's the exact same, mandate from the state, but their wording might be completely different.
That's about, I'd say, off the top of my head, about 2/3 of the policies are mandated by the Department of Education or the statutes, the codes, and, the legislature of New Jersey. However, there are a lot that are district specific. I use the example of use of facilities, how you unexcused attendance, what you excuse, you don't excuse, discipline codes, those kinds of things. Or do you have something for, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, an opioid, in case if someone has an opioid overdose, do you have Narcan on the district if they're a K-8, they're K-8, correct, I believe?
Long Branch? No.
Long Branch, no.
They have a high school.
They have a high school. Yeah, so there could be different specifics. However, they also have to follow the same laws you have to follow, but there are some uniquenesses along the way that will be different from your school.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a variation, but not, I'd say about 2/3 of the policies will probably be the same.
Any other board members with comments or questions for Sandy? All right, Mr. Weinstein, anything?
No, that was great. Thanks, Sandy, for the conversation prior and all the help, and looking forward to following up on this over the next couple of weeks.
Well, hopefully we'll get the audit done by the end of the month. We'll forward it to you and then move forward from there.
Great.
Thank you for your
Great.
time
Thanks a
tonight,
lot.
Sandy.
All right, stay safe.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Janron, anything else in your
Nope,
report?
that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janron. At this time, we will move to public comment. All motions are posted on the bulletin board of the district website. At this point in the meeting, we will now conduct the first of 2 public comment sessions. The first session will be open for public comment on agenda items only. The second session will be at the end of the meeting and can be on any topic. Would anyone from the public like to comment on any agenda item at this time? And as a reminder to everyone or anyone who might be new to us, if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please use the chat function and send a message to the help desk. Again, send a message to the help desk through the chat function, and Ms. Conway will assist you in asking a question. So we'll just give everyone a moment, and Ms. Conway, please let me know if we have anyone in the queue.
Yes, I do. The first public commenter on the agenda items is Denise Bond.
Thank you, Ms. Bond.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, so when the superintendent was talking about the vaccination, so these are my questions. One is on the testing, one is on the vaccination. So would that be the time to ask now?
You can, yes, thank you.
Okay, so I was trying to listen to 2 things at once, so I hope I get my question right. So I was trying to listen to, Greg Kelly, Dr. Scott Atlas. But for the vaccination, what is the plan for any teacher or staff member that doesn't feel safe to return to school, but also chooses not to get vaccinated? Because our kids really need to be in school. I'm talking more about the upper grades at this point, because my first grader is now and staying in a Catholic school, and she'll be staying in there for next year as well.
All right, let me ask Dr. Stefankowitz to address the vaccine question, and then we'll come back for your testing question.
So Ms. Bond, just so I understand what you're asking. So if a staff member chooses not to get vaccinated, what would be the process? Well, I mean, whether a person gets vaccinated or not is their personal choice. We are not intending to require vaccination. However, we will operate our district based on the health conditions and the health remedies that are available at a particular time. And if it's deemed that we are able to operate full students, full staff when that time comes, it will be the expectation that staff would return. Any staff member that does not feel comfortable in doing so has the option to request a leave of absence from the Board of Education. So.
Okay. My second question regarding the testing. Now, I heard some of, and I'm not really sure, like I said, that I heard everything right because I was watching Scott Atlas. the doctor. But regarding the testing, I heard something about, the kids doing a summer program, but, and one of my children might be one of those kids, but what if, my child already has committed to a summer activity program and it would fall from, during that time? And who pays for that also?
I think that those might have been two things that were combined. Dr. Stefankowitz gave an update on state testing requirements that we just found out about. And then there was also discussion of a grant that we're applying for and the possibility that that could be used towards summer programs. So I think it was two separate things that, perhaps got combined. So Dr.
Correct.
Spinks, do you want to just touch on both of them quickly?
Yeah, I was talking about the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, the NJSLA last year, that because of the pandemic, there was a waiver from the federal government, and the New Jersey did not administer the NJSLA this year. There is no such waiver, and New Jersey is moving forward with the new NJSLA as originally scheduled. So that will be happening in a window through, say, March through May. And then as far as the summer programs, that was, Ms. Fuller is correct, that we have current summer programs. We are always looking to potentially expand our summer programs, particularly in this time where we know that students need extra academic support. And of course, no student would be required to attend a summer program. That would be a choice of a parent and a student.
Typically, when are students informed if they would be offered time?
Typically after the budget is passed and we know that we can fund, particular programs. So I would say as we get into May, early May.
Okay, so I'm sorry, who's responsible for the payment then for a summer program? Would that be the school or the parent?
We don't charge students, except for if we're talking about traditional high school summer school for students to have to repeat a course for credit because they did not achieve a passing grade in a course, then that responsibility does fall on the child and the parent. But for our advancement summer programs or our enrichment summer programs, there is no cost to the student or parent for those programs.
Okay, thank you for your clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Bond. Ms. Conway, are there others in the queue?
Yes, the next commenter on the agenda is Sandy Abdelaziz.
Thank you, Ms. Abdelaziz. And as a reminder, and I apologize, I didn't say it before, please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Marianne. You said my name right that time. Sandy Abdelaziz, 30 Dune Road in Wayside. Just a quick question for clarification, because I know people are going to be asking me. So we're looking at like a month out, possibly, depending on how the virus is going, obviously, to possibly bring back, I think I heard you say 9, 12, and 6. Was that right?
Correct.
Okay. And before then, you're going to be doing some kind of a survey of them like we did before, where they have to specifically.
Yeah. This would be, are you coming or are you not? And student specific, name required. You need to tell us what your intent is. Busing, food we need food, we need busing. So very similar to what we did earlier in the year for elementary students.
Right. Okay. So I just want to, one comment that did come out of elementary, which I think I've made here before, is make sure that they understand that it's 4 or none and there is no more hybrid, because that was one of the big things with the elementary, that you did away with hybrid and they had no idea. Okay, so if we're looking at, say, let's just suppose like a March 2nd, March whatever date, like how far ahead would they expect to see that survey? Would it be a week?
We're hopeful that will be out by the end of the week, end of this week.
Oh, okay. Okay, so a few weeks before the actual move. Okay.
Right.
All right, thank you. That was it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Next.
We just got one more question from Denise Bond. You just see if it's a agenda question.
Yeah, it's an agenda question.
Go ahead, Ms. Bond.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought that, the grades were like, 6th through 8th and 9th through 12th, but the way, Sandy just said, it sounds like only 9th grade, 12th grade, and 6th grade?
It's going to be in tranches. So I'll let
Yeah,
the superintendent
so
go through again.
our March 1st, our tentative, what we're shooting for timeline is for March 1st would be 6, 9, and 12. So that we're looking at an incremental, return, and then looking at March 15th as the 7, 8, 10, and 11.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We'll just wait another moment to see if anyone else gets in line for questions. Ms. Conway, is there no one else?
At this time, there are no more commenters.
Thank you. We'll move on, and just as a reminder, there'll be a second comment period, so you can always ask a question at the end of the meeting. We'll move through the agenda. Approval of minutes, Mr. Weinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to move to approve the meeting minutes in accordance with Board of Education bylaws number 0168, recording of board minutes, a board meeting. Regular meeting exercise session minutes from January 19th, 2021. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Natalie. Does anybody have any questions or any comments about the meeting minutes? Okay. Mr. General?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. Financial Management and Resource Services, Ms. Tortorello.
Thank you. 4 items for discussion tonight. 8.1, Board of Education and Administration will discuss the acceptance of a $10,000 grant from the 2020 Sustainable Jersey Grant Cycle funded by the Gardinier Environmental Fund, as described below. 8.2, Board of Education and Administration will discuss a revision to the personnel salary percentages to be charged off to the ESEA grant application for the 2020-2021 school year as per the attached. 8.3, which I believe we've already covered. Mrs. Laura D. Tomaso of the Independent Certified Public Accounting Firm of Smolin, Lupin & Co. PA will be in attendance to review the annual school district audit for 2019-2020 school year as per the attached. And 8.4, Board of Education and Administration will begin the initial budget discussions for the 2021-2022 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Tortorello. Questions on, we'll start with questions on 8.1 and 8.2, and the budget discussion obviously is its own animal.
Can I make a comment about 8.1 first?
Absolutely, thank you.
Well, no, actually 8.3, can I read every page of the audit? No.
Yes. No, and appendix.
Slowly, Ken. Do it nice, slow, and concise.
Okay, just to comment on 8.1. This is something that the intermediate school, Mr. Amato and Patrick Sullivan, the science supervisor, and Megan Ensign, the teacher over there, but especially Maria Pontones. I'm not sure if I said her name correctly, but she's been a big help and is really not even a help. She's really spearheaded trying this project with the staff over there, and this is a start. This $10,000 is a small piece of the overall grant that's possible. I'm sorry, not the grant, but the project that they're looking to do. The cost of the project can be, $80,000 plus. So I just want to, it's great. It's always great to get grants, as we talked about in our grant discussion. but this is one that we have more to go. And I know she's very enthusiastic and has done a great job trying to drum up interest on getting other donations, maybe other grant applications, and applying for additional grant applications to try to fund a big, large piece of the rest of the money. So I just wanted to make sure that the board and the public is aware that this $10,000 is great, but it is a small piece of the overall grant, and hopefully we'll be able to, I'm sorry, I keep saying grant, of the overall project. So the $10,000 is a small piece of the overall project that is, that we're hoping to do with the greenhouse over at the intermediate school.
That's awesome.
So,
It's gonna be, yeah,
Really,
it'll
really
be great.
exciting.
And Ken, weren't there only like a couple in the state, right? How many were there that got this?
of this grant,
Yeah, the Gardenier, wasn't it only like 10 schools in the whole state?
it's probably in the attachment. They award, they award, this is yearly now, different school districts get it, based on the application each year. Like a couple of years ago now, we received $2,000 for the garden club at the high school, if the board remembers that. But yeah, there are not a lot of them, but it's every year. So this was a good get as far as grants go.
And just as a question, is our district like a Sustainable Jersey district? Because I know they have different levels within Sustainable Jersey that you can achieve based on, you do X number of things in your school and you go from like bronze to silver, gold.
Right. We are, the high school is registered as a sustainable school. And there have been a lot of changes, especially this year. If you remember our technology piece, the
Future Ready.
Thank you, Kelly. Was that Kelly?
Thanks,
The
Tom.
Future Ready escaped my mind for a second. The Future Ready portion, now they're combining the Sustainable New Jersey with the Future Ready so that they're two pieces of that. So we've been talking administratively on how the best way to go forward with this is. But it is an undertaking. It's a lot of the things that we do, but it's a lot of documentation that is good to do. So that we hope that, when the smoke clears on the pandemic, that's something that we can jump back into doing with the new combination of Sustainable New Jersey and the Future Ready technology portions. But we always apply for the grants, as we've talked about. They come out basically every year, and we apply for different things depending on what's going on.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on 8.1 and 8.2?
Who are we sending that press release out to?
Go ahead, Ken.
At least the coaster, and I know Maria's working on different places, but at least the coaster, Asbury Park Press, and the Today newspaper. And posting it for our normal distribution to the township and the libraries and where we send our meeting notices. But any other suggestions anyone has, please forward it to me. I know she's different people that Maria plans on sending it to try to drum up the additional donations.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ken. And obviously those items are for discussion. So now we will move on to budget. The start of our budget conversations. And just before you start, I just want to remind existing board members and let new board members know, if you have time, Mr. Genrum will always make himself available to go through the budget process, in between our meetings to kind of go through the budget, what it entails, to help answer any questions that you might have about the process or any kind of background information you want to have on the budget before we get into, because these conversations will be about the budget and moving forward. So anything you want to talk to Ken about I know he will happily avail himself to anyone who wants to sit down with him or do a call with him and that to get themselves caught up to speed.
Absolutely. We can do a double header audit first, and then we can jump into budget.
Popcorn.
Yeah, just bring a snack and
Policies.
you know, maybe a Saturday.
Nothing says good weekend.
Friday
Audit
night.
and a budget.
Ken, you're in good form.
I'm just happy to have both of these in the same meeting, the same workshop meeting.
You're performing at the Twilight Lounge on Thursday nights.
Not much,
You got dressed up for it, fancy.
Right.
All right, here we go.
Okay,
8-4.
here we go. I get the hint. All right, first, so I'm gonna zip through the process. Of course, please stop me and we can talk about anything within the process that we've done for years, but we've always tweaked things as boards change, board members change, the process and the times change. So of course, this year there's been more change than ever before. So I'm always open to reviewing or changing or tweaking things that we've done in the past. So first I want to go through, and Marianne, if you could pull up the first attachment is the budget calendar. It's labeled budget calendar. There we go. So for our 21-22 budget, just the basics of what we go through. We have a planning calendar. So in late October is when we roll the budget out to the principals, department heads, and then they roll it out to teachers and all staff members in the district as far as budget requests go. So as we accumulate all of that, and I'm not going to go through every line of the calendar, but you can take a look as we go. But up until about mid-December, all of those budget proposals are being formulated and are turned back into central office to my office. And then we accumulate all of those proposals together, and which constitutes, our proposed budget for 21-22. And then after that, we start looking at some of the big items, the capital improvements. We do site visits where the superintendent, myself, and the director of facilities, go to each of the schools and review the major projects or construction or renovations or equipment that's being requested by any of the different schools, and we review that with them. Then we start a series of meetings after that where the central office administrative team will sit with each supervisor, each educational subject area supervisor, and go through their budget line by line, and to completely understand what they're budgeting for. We look at their past actual spending. We have a spotlight that we shine on them and try to get them to sweat a little bit. No, I'm kidding. So it's a great process where we really learn a lot about not only their budget, but their future thoughts in that department and where they're headed, because that's important to budget not only for the next year, but for the future years after that, as to what they're looking long term as far as budget and the department goes. So we meet with all of them usually before the winter break, and then after winter break, we meet with each principal, and we do the same thing, and then also each department head. So there, as you can see on the calendar, there are many meetings that we go to, and we really get a good handle as to what the priorities are and everything that's in each of the budgets. Also, you see in there. Well, then the next step is really what we're beginning tonight is the review with the Board of Education. Tonight's presentation is more of where we are, and then next week we'll start going into some of those requests that we talked about, the big things. We do not review every piece of paper and pencil, but as Ms. Fuller said, if anyone would like to look at those, you can come in and we can go over all of that with any board member that would like to. One thing I skipped over is there also is the county office. The county superintendent of schools is also involved in the budget process. There are really two times where they are involved. The first time is a mid-budget mid-year budget review. So we are going, I think, the 21st. Mr. Dr. Stavankwitz and I.
February 10th.
Is it February 10th? Oh, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. Yes, that's 21, the year. So February 10th, we go to the county and they, again, we go through the current year budget with them to see where we are. And then if you skip to the next page of the calendar, there's another date where we'll go back to the county and discuss with them our budget for 21-22. So they're really, and I think they'll both be Zoom this year, but there are two spots in the budget calendar where we discuss with the county our initiatives, finances, educational initiatives, and everything going on, in our district. So then the big part of the calendar is in February when the governor's address is when the governor gives his budget address, because that's when we get a good picture of our revenues. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But when he gives his address, within 2 days, we receive our state aid figures. And although in the past couple of years, they've changed even after that budget address, usually used to be that we had a good idea of where our revenues were, because you'll see that state aid is one of the biggest parts of our revenue side of our budget. And then that really lends us to know where we are as far as the budget tax levy cap and things of that nature, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And then we have a tentative budget we present to the county. And so that'll be at a March 16th meeting. And then we will have a public hearing, final budget adoption on April 27th. So in between the tentative budget being sent to the county, if the Board of Education feels that they want to tweak anything, that can be done before the 27th public hearing. And then on the 27th, that's the final day where the decisions would be finalized and approved. And then that would be the final adoption of the budget for the year. Okay. Any questions on the calendar? Okay, and Mary Ann, if you can go to the next attachment. All right. So I'm gonna zip through these, and I'm gonna start with revenues. Okay, so I just discussed a little bit of some of our revenues and the big pieces of our revenues, which was that the 8.73% pie of the chart. That is our state aid. Now, of course, the biggest piece, by far the biggest piece of that revenue pie chart is the support from the taxpayers. So, of course, and I think the auditor alluded to it as far as revenues go, and we talk about revenues a lot, whether it's rentals or donations or some of the things that you've seen on the agenda tonight. But if you look in this pie chart relative to our other revenues, it's less than 1%, the 0.77%, and that would be camps, that would be churches, that would be any other facility rentals that we do. So it's important to note that these are the 2021 figures. So what I'm trying to do is establish is where we are now, because in our future meetings we're going to be looking at where we're going as far as the 21-22 budget. So what we're looking at right now is the 2021 budget, where we are this year. Okay, so you see the fees, rentals, state aid, and then the auditor also talked about the fund balance. If you remember, and what she had said about that was a good thing. We didn't really stop and break it down, but our fund balance has increased as to what we can put to next year's budget. And much of that had to do with the pandemic in the last few months where we were not here. We were able to save some dollars that is a good thing, because we'll be able to put that towards next year's budget to help offset some loss in revenues that we're going to have. So the next, Mary, if you can go to the next slide. is our state aid. And I think everyone knows or that we've been losing state aid. And in this slide shows just some bullet points on where we've been since 2009, 2010, where we've lost over $3 million in aid and over the last 11 years. And then you can see some of the reductions that we've had since 17, 18 to where we are now this year in 2021. So we've lost over $1 million in aid just since 17, 18. If you go to the next slide, Marianne, you'll see this in the bar graph, the actual numbers, when we were over almost at 10 million and where this year we're down to 6.7 million in state aid.
Kind of feels nice that next year that big number will.
And it's going to keep going.
I
Yeah, it's going to keep going down. though.
don't see the depression.
Right.
See,
You can
Dr.
go to-
Marshall here right now. Ken,
I was
be
thinking he
making
would
comments
be,
about this.
he would be
Yeah, so-
happy about
No,
that.
I zeroed it out for
Zero.
him. Otherwise, it would have looked a lot bigger drop.
Dr. Marshall's legacy here.
That's right.
Yes.
It's true. That's true.
Okay, Marion, you can go to the next slide, please. And then this is where we're going to be. So this year specifically, we'll be discussing the loss of approximately $525,000 for the 21-22 budget. Now, you also see 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25, where we'll continue to lose. So we have to keep that in mind too, as we make this budget decisions about the future of state aid and that piece of revenue that will be declining. And so then you see the bottom, the combined will be over $2.4 million loss in state aid. And then the next page, Marion. So then this is what will look like. This is the same pie chart, but this is projected revenues in 24-25. And then you see that the 8.73% of the budget that was state aid in the 2021 year is now down to 6.5%. And you see the biggest piece of the pie is almost at 90%, which is the reliance on taxpayer funds. Okay, so next, I just want to take a second to talk about the cap. We talk about how we have to operate within a cap, within the state mandated cap. What's important to note is that the cap is a cap on our tax levy. So it's a cap on a piece of our revenue. It's not a cap on what we spend. I'll explain that a little bit more. Of course, it relates to what we spend, but it is a cap on how much we can tax the local taxpayer, which is that biggest piece that that 90% that will be in 24-25. So we go to the next slide. So you can see back one, Marianne, please. The other way. There we go. Okay, so this is how we look at our cap. So again, now these are so from the pie chart, you now see the category, the source is your first column is the source of each of our revenues, the major categories of our revenues. You have the local tax levy, the state aid, the surplus, and the miscellaneous rentals that we've talked about and seen in the previous slides. The next column is the 2021, and these are actual numbers. Our actual tax levy, the state aid, the surplus, and our miscellaneous rentals, which are all in percentages on the pie charts, but these are the actual dollar figures. So now if we project where we might be for the 21-22 budget, you see what I've done is I've fixed the tax levy, just projecting a 2% increase on the tax levy. Again, this is what is where the cap exists, is on the tax levy, on how much we can raise in local taxes. So that comes out to the $68 million figure, and you see under the column, the dollar increase column, you see the 1,334,000 number. So that's what represents 2% in additional tax levy that the board can raise without having to look to a tax waiver or without having to go to vote to the public, because it is important to note that if the board felt strongly enough about something, we could go to a vote on the budget with the additional amount over the 2%. All right, so now let's go to the next row there, the state aid. And we have a projected, we spoke about in the previous slides, the $525,000 decline in state aid. So now you're going to see how a loss in one piece of revenue is going to affect our cap. So now we did hear good news tonight from the auditors that our next row, our surplus row, is going up. So this will help to offset some of this issue that we were talking about. So, but for illustration purposes, I have the surplus staying the same. Okay, so you see that's a 0% increase, and then the next row is the miscellaneous rentals, the $600,000, which is I also have staying the same. And with all of our loss in facility rentals, that may be iffy also. But what does that do? So if you continue down, you see the total revenue row, and you see that what we're allowed, the $1.3 million, then with the loss of state aid, it nets out to $809,000, right? And that's that's just over 1%. So now that's what we can raise our expenses, the $809,000, or just over 1%. So even though it's a 2% cap on our tax levy, what we can raise from taxes, essentially because we're losing other revenues, it lowers our cap as to how much more we can spend. Does everybody get that? All right, good. So and hopefully, and with what the auditors talked about tonight, we should be able to go up a little bit more than that because of the surplus. But as we go through this process, we may have to lower the rental amount too, as far when we look at that, the revenues going into the 21-22 year.
Are you finding yourself using a lot of numbers from 2019, or from, what would it be, 2018, 2019? Like, because I mean, I feel like some of our expenses and some of our things last year are very different.
Yes, it's a good point. It's very difficult. We always look at, you can always have usually have a good history of actual expenditures, what's going on in the current year and what's happened in the past year. But what's happened in the past year wasn't normal because we had from mid-March to June where some expenses went up and others dropped off. We're like this, and it's continued a little bit this year too, not to as great as extent, but we have some expenses that are custodial,
right.
The PPE, we have those things that have really gone up, but then also on the other side, we have transportation, there are no field trips, it's sports, things. So we have other savings that we're realizing. So this is a very difficult budget year to try to see those trends because you're right, Amy. I may have to go back to like 18, 19 and really to try to get a good handle of where we are and where we're going for 21-22. So it's going to be difficult, but we'll do the best we can. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. These are the next 3 slides or 4 slides are expenses that the board can take a look at. These are everything from last year's budget. Again, if you have any questions, I can go over them. I think the important thing to note is if you keep going, Mary Ann, these are the different categories we have. Go to the expense classifications. One more slide. Keep going, Mary Ann. One more. There we go. Just to note, salary and wages and employee benefits. If you look at the top 2 highest percentages of the budget, that's that last column to your right, and you see that between the 2 of those things, you're about 81% of the budget is made up of salaries and benefits, which goes to really a labor-intensive industry that education is in, and so that's a big thing when we talk about personnel and and contracts and negotiations and things like that. That's where a large amount of the budget on the expense side it lives. And you can see also if you look down at the bottom, you see the increase, decrease. These are from last year. So you see that last year we went up to 1.358992 million, and that was a 1.76%. So just as a reminder to some of the board and the new board members that we were under the 2% last year, and then we'll see how we do this year. And then the same information in the next chart is the same information just in the pie chart. So that's that. And then just a quick, and this really goes back to Amy's point. The next slide, please, Marianne. Some of the things that these slides are from our budget presentation. These are the things that we approved for the current year budget. And I know we had talked about the public relations position that was on the budget. Now, some of these things, like the big variances we had in what we were spending money on, that was abnormal. Some of these positions we've either delayed because we did not know going into this year where we were going to be, how much funding we were going to get from CARES. And you saw that we've done okay as far as that goes, but there's still a lot of uncertainty out there as far as funding levels from the state, federal for the pandemic, and then also for our state aid coming up. So some of these items, I just put them in there for review. If anybody has any questions, these are the personnel additions. And then the next slide, Marianne, were the capital upgrades. Some of the things we're still working on that we've kind of put off to the spring. Some of the things we normally would have done probably in the fall, like the solar panels or the playground area at the intermediate school. Some has been pushed off to the spring.
We held off on the switches, right?
No, we did not.
We went ahead with that?
Yes, we went ahead with that. That was, considered part of our infrastructure, and we needed that more.
Oh, we did that,
was
right.
Yeah, remember, that was one of the things
right.
with the laptops, and one of the things that we needed, because we were going all remote, we wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that we were gonna be, the infrastructure of the network was as good as possible.
Yes, that's right.
I just had a question. I know last year in board docs, you had like a post date, you had like April 4th, whatever the budget presentation was, and all the budget items lived there, so we could go back to one spot.
Hey, were you looking at my notes? Could you?
No, is it?
No,
I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Because that was very
right.
helpful last
Good.
year.
Right. So what I will do is create. It used to be, and I know Denise remembers
It was a notebook.
the old notebook. We used to have a 3-ring binder with everything that we went over, and we would put it in the binder for everybody. So the next meeting, you could, when we go on to a different topic, you can refer back to something. So now we do it electronically. So yes, on board docs, there will be a meeting that will be set up for that April 27th public hearing. So that meeting will be set up, and then instead of having committees down the left, it'll have the dates of each workshop meeting that we've discussed budget. So for instance, it's going to have February 2nd will be the first one, and all the information that we talked about tonight will be there.
Was it by date, or I thought it was by section last year?
It's by date, and then
and then the sections.
And then sections were broken out. You can still go on and look at last year's too. It's still there. So it'll be by date, and then it'll be by section as far as revenues or whatever that we discuss.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman?
Yes, Mr. General, I have a question, actually 2 questions. So this year we had to quickly budget for extra custodial services, for PPE, plastic shields, everything that we needed to make our schools safe. For next year, we really don't know what we're going to need as far as PPE and custodial services, cleaning services, et cetera. Will that fall under any kind of state revenue, or should the president's relief package come through? I don't know, it just seems so tenuous. How are we going to approach that? Or if we get some federal money, will we be able to use it for other things, or will it have to go toward COVID-related items?
That's a very good question and a good point, because we don't know. Some of the money we've gotten has been targeted. Did you have to use it towards technology or things of that nature? What's coming with the new administration, or if it's coming? Yeah, I just don't know. And that's, and hopefully with the budget address of the governor in, the third week in February and I don't think they've announced that date yet, or I haven't seen it yet anyway.
If I may, Ken, I'm sorry, in the bill that was passed by Congress at the beginning of the year, there was monies put aside for K-12 schools. It's my understanding that was to be delivered to the states, who would then dole it out to the districts. We may see that come through in the budget address. There may be a new budget line that speaks to, CARES money or COVID-related aid that is from that federal money. So, but to be determined, we're not sure.
So we hope, we do the best we can to plan for the worst and, hope for the best type of thing. But, and we'll find out in the next really 2 months, and we'll try to plan as best we can, but we always talk about budgets. Budgets are never perfect. From the day, they change after the day that you finalize them. Things are going to go up, but things are going to go down. But it's been the last year and a half, or a year now, I guess, has been more ups and downs than normal. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
I have a question. And I know, caveat, of course, this is all estimates proposed, not anything is in stone yet, but just so I understand, the expense cap that we're looking at is 1.05%, and the projected increase in expenses is 1.76%. So we have to make those two numbers be equal.
No, I'm sorry. Those were two different. The 1.76, where I was showing you really the current year's budget. The 1.05 was projected for next year, for the 21-22.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't have.
I'm sorry, I kind of went back and forth
No,
on
that's
years there.
Okay, that makes sense.
So right now, we're looking at it just over 1% expense increase that we can budget for.
Okay.
Now, with the news again from the auditor tonight about our surplus, that should go up. It won't be 2% because we'll still be losing money from state aid, but and I certainly do not anticipate any additional funds from fees or rentals.
Right.
But unless that state aid, there is a movement now, and I know the board members from the prior, we've participated and we're members of SOS. It's an advocacy group of other school districts like the Freehold Regionals, the Toms Rivers, the Brick Townships, where they're losing, we're losing about 2.4 million. They're losing 24 million. So we're part of that group advocating, and the push for this year will be, because of the pandemic, to try to hold these districts harmless that are, because of S2, if everyone remembers the S2 legislation, that's what put into motion the loss in our state aid, really based on our enrollment, and the other districts the same. And so the push is to try to hold districts harmless, or at least delay some of this loss in state aid, or stretching it out longer as far as how many years we will lose those funds, to bring it out another 5 years, so that it's not as much of an impact on us over a few years. So maybe that something of that nature could happen, or as Dr. Svankwitz said, maybe different, maybe federal aid or state aid as far as the pandemic would help. So more to come is all I can say.
Yeah, but I think the thing that showed itself during the pandemic was that the government aid kind of jumped in and helped us in specific areas, right? Which was kind of an overlay to the current budget that we had, right?
Yep,
That's the reason why we have the surplus.
Yep,
is
absolutely.
because we saved on the operating side and we still received funds to help us through the COVID-related issues, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't think it would be silly for us, I think, to expect it to be much different. And hopefully hopefully we're not going to need this when we start our, the year in July, but it would seem that we would want to go and plan our business as if we don't have to plan for that, right?
Well, I think we, as we normally do, we have priorities, and at any time, we're ready to go down that list of priorities to be shortened up if we don't receive the funding on the revenue side that we would anticipate. So we kind of review the large items and work on that priority, administrative
Well,
priority list.
what I'm saying is, to Irene's point, so we had a surplus because of how we had to operate during this pandemic, right?
Correct.
Which allowed us to take advantage of other money to allow us to kind of grow our surplus and continue, right? So if we're going to be planning, I'm assuming we would be planning the same way we planned last year, that the school would kind of open regularly in September, and if it didn't, we would still then start accumulating that surplus again, right? Because
I think we accumulated it though because we were all remote. This year we're not seeing those same savings because we were in a hybrid schedule.
I see.
Remember back in April, May,
right? We were
June,
remote.
We weren't here at all. So now with the hybrid schedule, it's a little different, but the concept is still there, just not to that degree.
Yes, I understand. Right.
Not to that degree.
Right. And so by the next meeting, will you know what the surplus is and what the?
I can. I have it tonight from the auditor. So, when we can.
So we're just in the early stage here.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
Can I ask for major revenue items like facilities, Camp David, et cetera? When would we have to make a decision as a board that we would allow things like that to happen on the property for them to have enough time to then run a camp, right? So when we're thinking about big things like that we didn't have, when do we have to know that we have to make decisions like that? Is it March? Is it May?
Yeah, normally it's about now. Normally it's February. They're looking to send out, camp brochures and things like that for the summer. So it's probably within the next month or so that, because remember, that's also part of the equation. Camp David is about, $230,000 that we did not receive this year in the 2021 year because that did not happen this summer.
Right.
And then there's also other revenues that we've lost. That brings us up over about $300,000 that we've lost on the revenue side. For next year, your question is, I would, and I'm actually surprised I haven't heard from him yet, but I would think within the next month that we may need to make a decision on that.
You haven't heard from the Camp David people yet?
Correct. I have not heard from them yet, but we do have a contract with them. It goes into, I'm pretty sure it goes into next year. Now, of course, because of the pandemic, it doesn't mean we have to, the contract is just for how much the increase in the rent would be.
But are they obligated to the contract?
I'm sorry?
They're not obligated, right?
Of course, there are notification clauses in the contract. So if something was to, if they didn't feel that they could run a successful camp, they would not, we couldn't hold them to the.
Correct, right.
To the monies. So that is a big question. I guess my answer would be within the next month. That would be my guess.
Maybe we should find out what they're even thinking and when their kind of drop dead is, so that we as a board know when we have to make those kinds of decisions.
One thing to keep in mind is that last year, going into the summer, the rules governing youth camps and things like that weren't made available till very close to the summer. So it was very, this year those exist already. So we may be able to operate under those same. We know what the parameters. We know now what those parameters might be, and based on, and we also have a summer that we went through, knowing kind of what happened with cases in the summer and what have you. So we have a little bit more knowledge this year than we didn't have last year.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, that's all for me as far as budget goes.
Other questions? I see Ms. Gilman and then Ms. Hayes.
Ken, we've been going month by month for our use of facilities. Do we have any requests from other of our users for facilities in coming up maybe at our next meeting for March?
I can check and report back next week. Oh, well, actually, that's normally when we would, yeah, usually that, yeah, on the agenda for next week would be for March, that decision. That's normally when we would do it. As you said, we've been going month to month. So usually they're like the first, second week, we would be looking towards the next month as to whether we would allow people back or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have, can you guys hear me? I had to switch to my 9-year-old's equipment here. She's watching TV now. Does the committee, the budget committee, or all of the Board of Ed get the list from the principals of what the building administrators want?
We do, yes, we do, well, yes and no. We do the large, all personnel items that are requested, and all new personnel items that are requested, I should say, and then all capital items. So that would be anything really over $2,000 would be considered by item would be considered a capital item. So those are brought to the board. So if they're looking for workbooks or things like that, things of that nature would not be. But anything large, any new program or things of that nature, we would typically bring to the board.
And almost like a line item or a wish list or something per school, and do we eventually go over it? Like, okay, that, no to that. I'm just, as a parent, I'm trying, some of these budget numbers are obsolete to me, and it's very confusing. But I would want to know, oh, my principal asked for this, this, and this, and this. I think that's good or not, or whatever. I'm just wondering if there's like an enumerated list from each building, and it sounds like there is.
Of the major items, yes.
Yes, okay.
And Alex, you should be able to go back to last year's budget folder, and you could kind of look at the meeting by meeting, what we go through to get a flavor of what's going to be coming.
Okay.
And look at that. I mean, Ken can get the free too, but you can go back to that folder from last year and go through what Amy was referring to meeting by meeting, and you'll get a sense of what the pace takes us through. We'll look at capital, we'll look at personnel, et cetera, and it'll give you a sense of the level of detail that we that we typically go through at the meetings.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Janarone? All right, Ken, anything else?
Can we do payroll next, or? No, I'm kidding. No, that's it.
Gotta save something for next week.
Dear God.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you to Ms. Tortorello and to Mr. Janarone. Moving along to instruction, education, and student activities, Ms. Gilman.
Yes, Mrs. Fuller, there are 2 items for our consideration this evening. 9.1, cancellation to out-of-district private tuition for the 2020-2021 school year. Move to approve a cancellation to out-of-district private tuition for 2020-2021 school year in accordance with the attached memorandum dated January 22nd, 2021, as listed below. 9.2, discussion of 2021-2022 school calendar for teachers and students. Can you move that up a little bit, Mrs. Conway, so I can read that? Where'd it go? Yes, well, discussion of the school calendar for teachers and students.
Thank you. So I guess we can We can move the first and then move on to the discussion of the second, if you want to do that, Ms. Goldman.
Sure.
We'll need a second. I'll second that.
Can I ask a question about 9-1?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Talarico.
Sorry. I was just wondering, why is this student's out-of-district private tuition being canceled? Did the student move? Did the
Yes.
student graduate?
The
change
student,
school?
the student moved.
The student moved. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions on 9-1? Mr. Jenner.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were gonna do discussion on 9.2.
No, we're going to vote and then this.
I got you. All right. Mrs. Beal,
Yes.
this is 9.1. Mrs. Gilman,
For 9.1, yes.
Ms. Hayes,
Yes, for 9.1.
Ms. McGovern,
Yes.
Ms. Paralamas,
Yes.
Ms. Talarico,
Yes.
Ms. Tortorello,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Dr. Singh, do you want to talk about the calendar?
I sure do. Ms. Conway, if you can put the calendar up, the proposed calendar for next year, if you don't mind, I think if you have that. So let me first start by just kind of giving the board, particularly the new members, sort of a background, and of course the public as to what goes into the development of the calendar. It really starts, really, I think, with the association contract that we have, because that dictates how many days contractually staff members, particularly teachers, are contracted to work in a year. Every district is a little bit different. Some are, state law requires that kids be in school a minimum of 180 days. So they all have to be at least 180 days. But some contracts require teachers to be in 183, 184, what have you. Ours is 187. So that enables us to do a little bit more professional development and do a number of different things within the year. So it works out well. And also to build in when and if we ever use snow days again, whether, building days that then we don't have to extend the school year to ensure that we meet the minimum 180. So that's sort of the starting point. And then what we take a look at, of course, are major holidays, the things that we as a district value in terms of holidays and in terms of how many, days. I know sometimes there's question about, multiple days. In the past, there's been question about, do we need to take 2 days for Rosh Hashanah? Do we need to always take Easter Monday? Do we need, and that has been the tradition, and we've examined those things over the years, and it has always been sort of the idea that we would maintain what we currently have based on the feedback that we've received. So we also look to be in line with the county as best we possibly can. When I say the county, meaning other districts in the county, trying to line up spring breaks, winter breaks, what have you, because teachers obviously want to spend those times, and when teachers have when our teachers have a different break than other teachers, other districts, then sometimes they need to take time off for kids. And so we try to coordinate as much as we possibly can, but every district's a little different. Some districts take a February break and so on. So every district's a little different. So this is our calendar. This year, it's actually fairly boring. And Marianne, I don't know if you can kind of.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the agenda. Let me see if I can pull it up real fast. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay. I didn't know if number 6 up there said calendar.
9.2.
Was there no attachment?
No, it's there. It's attached.
Oh, I'm sorry.
9.2.
Well, I'll keep talking while we're looking. The main issue is really September.
9.2, Marion. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The rest of the calendar is pretty standard as far as how, different holidays fall. The biggest issue is just September, where the Rosh Hashanah holiday actually begins the night of Labor Day. So that, kind of creates a little bit of a different dynamic as far as how the school year is to start. Also, just so everybody understands that under New Jersey law, teachers' contracts, teacher workdays cannot be earlier than September 1 and no later than June 30th. So that's another parameter that we work under. So with this year, the Labor Day is a little bit late. It's the 6th, so which means the 1st and it falls the week before Labor Day. So it's our plan to start the school year with staff on the 1st and 2nd. That's the Wednesday and Thursday before for Labor Day. The Friday, we would then probably just have a 12-month employees report on that day. No 10-month employees to report on Friday before Labor Day. And then we have a nice little break because of the 2-day Rosh Hashanah holiday. We would then have the kids start on Thursday, the 9th of September. Yom Kippur is the following week. And so September is a little disjointed with a lot of days off, but once we get through those first couple of weeks, then we hit a nice groove at that point. So that's really, I mean, outside of when Passover is the same night as Good Friday, they begin. So that's not an issue because sometimes they don't line up, but this year they line up. So everything else is pretty standard and straightforward. So that's the calendar. Also, what we do with the process is I go over it with the administration. I go over it with Mr. Riley as the TOEA president, and I go over it with the PTA presidents for all of their input. And we are not, obligated to do that, but we think it's important to get the feedback of the different facets of our community. And then, of course, we bring it to the board for discussion and approval. So. Any questions on what we've got for next year?
No, I just wish that we were able to pull this up so that.
Yeah,
I apologize. I'm looking for it. I don't see it on mine.
I believe it's in the link that we received because I noticed on when I was looking at the board docs on my iPad, I did not see it, but when I looked at the link from, oh my gosh, I believe Ms. Boomer.
We can put it back up next week if we'd like, and just.
Marianne, I did just email it to you as well, the attachment, so maybe you can pull it up from there.
But I do have a question, Dr. Stefankowitz, or Ms. Fuller. I recall hearing a representative from I believe the New Jersey School Boards Association stating that boards do not approve the calendar. Is this more of just a courtesy?
We've always, I can tell you that I've always had a board officially approve the calendar. I don't know that, I guess theoretically it's not an absolute requirement, I guess, in thinking about it, but I've always done it.
Yeah, it's standard practice for Ocean.
Yeah, and for everywhere I've ever been, it's what it's what we've done. So, it's a good question.
No,
it's a good question. It's never really been an issue. Everywhere I've ever been, the superintendent has presented the calendar and the board's approved it. And so that's just what we've always done. I think it's good to have the board, just sanction the calendar. I will say that it's typical not to have the Board of Education provide, it's more of an approval than it is a big discussion item typically at the board level. Most of the time that, it's discussed and decided upon through the administration. And, really it's more of I don't want to say ceremonial, but it's more of just a process that we go through to achieve the board. Unless there's some overwhelming change that the board would like to see, it's usually something that follows the administrative recommendation. Like, for example, if we were to come through and say, we're no longer going to take 2 days for Rosh Hashanah, if the board had significant, problems with that, then we could go back to the drawing board or what have you. But we are in fact still doing that. No, we're all good. So
we cannot physically ask teachers to be in before September 1st, is what you said, right?
That is correct. We do have a new teacher orientation prior to that time, but that is, you know, non-contractual and something that we do for our new staff to the district. But as far as when the calendar cannot begin before September 1, correct?
Of course, the total number of days are dictated by the collective bargaining agreement, the contract also.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And when we one day can see it, we can always put it on for next week, not for even discussion, just for view.
I put it in the chat, if anyone can click on the chat.
Yeah, I can share, I can switch to sharing my screen if that's okay, and I should be able to still do it, if that's all right with everyone.
And we are very hopeful in planning on a regular school year next year. That is absolutely our hope. 5 days a week, all day long, you know, I know that sounds crazy these days, but that's
Can
what
you
we're,
guys see that now?
Yes.
yes,
Yes?
no, I can't,
No, I can't see it.
Some of you can?
I can't,
What?
I cannot.
Elective.
Elective. All right, well, it is in board
Maybe we should
docs.
just bring it on again next week.
We can put it up next week.
Well, this is for, are we voting or? it's
No,
discussion?
this is just a
It's
discussion.
Yeah, so we'll put it on for
Put it on next
next week too, but it's
Yep.
in board docs for anyone who wants to see it.
This
Okay.
is like the, when Jim had to talk about the election results for 20 weeks.
Yes.
It'll be the same thing.
Yes.
It's on
And the
calendar. Yeah. And there it is again.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Any other discussion on the calendar?
Mrs. Fuller, then we are,
Oh, you're digitized.
We lost your audio, Ms.
Yeah.
Gilman.
Can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
I think she was making sure that we weren't voting on it tonight.
We're not voting.
We're
on it.
not voting on the calendar tonight. It was for discussion only.
Are we voting next time?
We would vote at the regular meeting
At
typically.
the regular meeting.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gilman. Moving on, personnel, Ms. Paralamas.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move items 10.1 through 10.10. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Janarone.
Mr. Beal,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman,
Yes,
Ms. Hayes? Ms. Hayes still?
You're
Ms.
muted,
Hayes?
Missy. Yeah, you're muted. She's there.
Sorry, I had a question, but.
Yeah.
You can ask.
Can you give me a minute? Can I?
Well, it is personnel, so I'm not sure that we'll be able to answer it in open session.
Is this the
So,
one that had the coaches?
yes.
I was just wondering if you could explain what the categories were, like 6, 5, 4, I don't know what that meant. For spring.
I'd have to see.
I can,
It's the contractual, yeah, it's
Like group two,
it's
group
what
three.
category, group two, those are contractual pay scales.
Mhm.
So it's different, they're different sport or different coach, if it's an assistant coach or or a freshman coach, or maybe different pay scales. Different clubs have different pay scales. So that's typically what that refers to. And that's all listed that's all contractual.
Okay, I just don't know what group 2, group 3, year 5, year 2, no, means. So
No, it's based on, like I said, it's a contractual, negotiated item that puts different sports or different clubs in particular groups based on potentially the size of the club I'm sorry?
The number of hours.
Yeah, the number of hours involved, like some things go all year, some things only go, part of the year. And, also it could depend on how many years the person has been in that particular role. So, there might be, like, Ken, it's like a fifth year for group 3, like each year would group, first year, like a teacher contract where, each year there's a little bit of a raise within the negotiated agreement. It's all listed. If you go to our contract, which is online, it's all laid out there. We could get you, the copy of the contract. If you'd like to see, how it's all laid out.
Well, I'd prefer to just abstain from 10.12 12, but I vote yes for the others.
Okay, well, 10.12 was just for discussion. So we're
Alrighty
voting on
then.
10.1 through 10.10.
That's why I asked if it was about, okay,
Okay, so you're,
gotcha. So
It's a
I'm a
yes.
yay.
I'm sorry, Alex, it's a yes from 10.1 to 10.10?
Yes.
Ms. McGovern?
Yes.
Ms. Paralamas?
Yes.
Ms. Talarico?
Yes.
Ms. Tortorello?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
And Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Okay, the motion's carried.
Thank you, Ms. Parlamas. Policy we already covered. Thank you earlier for that, Mr. Weinstein. And so now we will move to old business. And actually, as part of old business, and I think we'll break this out as agenda categories or items going forward. But as part of this, I wanted to ask for Ms. McGovern to give an update on the Wellness Committee meeting that was held on the 21st. And Ms. Talarico, if there was anything to add from the reopening meeting that was held also on the 21st of January as part of their board reports and anything that wasn't already covered. So we'll go with Ms. McGovern first.
Sure, thank you. So Ms. Talarico and I went to the Wellness Committee meeting on January 21st, as Mrs. Fuller said. So it started out with a lot of building check-ins where each building was able to give us an idea of what's been going on in the buildings and some of the initiatives. Last week was the week of kindness. So Dow Avenue did a kindness challenge. There was some mindfulness stuff going on. One thing that was very interesting, I thought, was at Wayside School, Mrs. McHugh made a comment that she's been doing mindfulness for a couple of years, but she thinks that this year the kids are very involved in it and interested and really listening more, and which is good and bad, right? They're doing it, but she also thinks they need it more, which is a great, so it's an asset she thought was worth mentioning. The high school, as Dr. Stankiewicz has said, they reported that it seems empty, that a lot of the kids are doing better remote because they might have some social, anxieties about being in school. But a lot of the kids don't want to be there until it's back to normal. They have, the lunchroom seems to be a little bit of a.
It's depressing.
Right, that's
They
pretty
can't,
much.
they can't interact the way they would normally do. Lunch
Right.
is a very social thing. And, right now they're sitting at individual desks,
Yeah.
6 feet apart, it's.
And a lot of what came out of the survey was that they want to be there if everyone's there. So it sounds like once we open the gates, they'll all be hopefully coming. There are the SEL counseling sessions still being set up, but what most of the counselors did mention was that it seems to be the drop-ins that teachers are doing, just walking into their offices during the day, as well as the counselors are really traveling around the school, and somebody will grab them for a minute and kind of just vent and then move along. So they're seeing that is a little bit is more of a trend than the SELs, but they are still setting them up as people are still coming. So there's Wellness Wednesdays at Wanamassa. One of the things that was interesting there was that they're doing a social skills group as well as coping skills with, they've pulled some kids from 3rd and 4th grade that teachers have identified, or they have identified as students that would benefit. So one of the things at the high school was that they're opening up a wellness room during SEL time, or also during lunchtime for some kids to come in. Just, they can only hold a handful of kids with social distancing, but they're kind of giving kids another place to go, students, I should say. And, there's one-on-one wellness checks if students have been identified that they're able to reach out immediately to, which is another positive thing. They had responses on the survey of 375 to 400 responses, which was great.
The high school.
At the high school, yes, at the high school survey. And then we talked about, Mrs. Zona let us know that there's a equity speaker on September 2nd next year.
We're planning on
Possibly
bringing
being
in
in Allie Michaels, is her name?
Allie Michaels from the University of Pennsylvania, who is doing work with us right now at Monmouth University through the Central Jersey Consortium. We're hoping to have her be a keynote speaker to kick off the school year next
Yeah,
year.
so they're working on that. There's she also mentioned that there's a ton of PD coming up for social emotional and things like that, which is great. And she also mentioned that in the grant for the learning loss, there is an area for SEL that that we put in within the grant for equity coach expertise to work with staff and kids and renew curriculum. So a lot of that was put in there as well. Our next meeting is on February 25th. And I don't know, Ms. Tallarico, if you had anything to add to that.
Hi, I actually do. I have a few points to that. I had no idea that we were actually presenting tonight because I wasn't told and it wasn't on the agenda. So I have some things that I want to add to the Wellness Committee, but I have tons of notes from the other task force committee, but I didn't put anything together because I didn't know. So for the Wellness Committee, the staff are really working very, very hard, and I love to hear all the updates and so forth. So I give them a lot of credit for that. It is definitely not an easy year, and going forward, it's been a real struggle and challenge for everyone. So I want to thank them so much for what they're doing. But I do have some questions. There is an agenda for the Wellness Committee, but there's no meeting minutes. So I was wondering if anyone misses a meeting, they don't have a way of knowing what happened at the meeting unless they hear this update from the board. So I was wondering if maybe we can get committee meeting minutes. So that's number one. Number two, there's been 10 meetings so far, and when the committee was formed, it met weekly for 5 weeks. We spent reviewing an SEL framework by CASEL that was provided by the Department of Education as best practices for the school districts. It's a 53-page document and includes SEL, changing school climate to be more inclusive, surveys for identification of struggling students with emotional challenges, etc. Where are we with the implementation of this? Because we really haven't heard anything about this framework after September. So that, I'd like to take a look at in the future. What are the committee goals, the action plan, timeframes, outcomes? And three.
Tallarico, do you want to just pause there for a second? I'll see if Dr. Stefankowitz or Ms. Zona want to respond to that before we move on to the next point.
I don't think Ms. Zona is with us this evening. Obviously, all of these things, if you want to, you share them with me, I can let Ms. Zona know, we can put them on the next agenda. I mean, obviously, a lot of the things that we would normally like to do in a regular year, the day-to-day operation and happenings is what takes precedence right now. And many of those things that you probably mentioned are part of that and are, taking place in some capacity. So, I would just say, if these are things you want to put on the next agenda, obviously, let myself or Ms. Zona know, and we can get them on the next agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. Number three is the surveys. So if I could touch briefly on that, or if you'd rather, I could bring it up in old business.
No, we can go over it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fuller. So back in September and October, the Wellness Committee discussed implementing student survey to identify struggling students needing counseling and other help. And this was just emphatically opposed by administration, citing years ago there was a survey sent out that caused legal issues.
Yeah, if I can interrupt, I'm sorry, it was not emphatically opposed. We just said that if we were going to do any kind of survey, we had to just be very careful about the types of questions we would ask. And also we probably would have to get active consent depending on the questions we would ask. We did not oppose any survey.
Okay, it wasn't able to, be sent out. We'll say that. So I asked to see this survey, and it was a 238 question psychological inventory. The survey I proposed and the Wellness Committee had discussed was 5 questions. So instead of a Google counseling form was created and implemented right before Christmas, and then sent out via social media and online after Christmas. The results were only 2 requests for counseling that were received. So unbeknownst to the Wellness Committee or board, a survey was sent out to the high school with 1 question. And I applaud the high school for sending out this question because it was an SEL question. And it basically asked students, how have they been feeling all year? 1, I'm great. 2, I'm okay. 3, I'm not okay. This yielded 43 responses of needing further follow-up by our outstanding counseling department. So I have two questions. Why was this question finally allowed on a student survey when it was met with opposition months ago? And given the results, that we were able to identify 43 students that are struggling out of the students that responded, can we do a middle school or elementary school similar question survey that we did for the high school?
Yeah, once again, no question or no survey was told it can't go out. It was simply just based on previous experience about what we've experienced in the district in terms of what we are going to ask students, that we have to just be mindful of the types of questions we ask when we're sending out a student survey. That was a question that the principal in her survey wanted to ask, and there's no reason a similar question can't be asked. We've typically asked an SEL type question on every survey that we've done from the district as well, where parents have put in comments, and all of those comments have gone to the principals for their consideration and to reach out to those parents if they've identified that their children are in need of extra support. So there's many outreaches going on. Our counselors are busy every day, as you've stated, and they're seeing a lot of kids and talking with a lot of kids and helping a lot of kids. So I think the outreach is happening, and I think we're addressing the needs of kids in many ways.
The outreach is definitely happening, but what I'm saying is that one question brought 43 identified 43 students that were struggling that the counselors were able to contact. So the reason I'm asking for that one question going out to students is to identify anyone that is younger than the high school. Because,
yeah, sorry.
go ahead.
I was
Only
gonna say,
because
I
the
know on
Google
elementary
form-
level, I think on the elementary level, it's being handled class by class. They're doing kind of a morning report in some of the classes where they ask the kids in a more probably, age appropriate, delicate way, how they're feeling on the class by class. So maybe it's that middle school.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe middle
everybody,
school.
everybody looks at it, nobody is preventing anyone from sending out, any kind of survey that they want to do on a school-wide level to allow them to do that. I can certainly speak with Mr. Amato tomorrow to see if that's something that, either he working with the SACs or working with his counseling staff, that see if, that's something that they would like to do.
I mean, I just think as a professional at this point, it would be, very relevant and beneficial to do what we did at the high school, at the middle school, to identify more kids that are struggling. Because I know they're out there and they may not be, able to access the Google form, or they may not even know about it. I know for my daughter on her Google Chrome, there was a link for a SAC counseling referral. And when I clicked on it, it was permission, I didn't have permission for that. So I asked about that with the wellness committee, and there is, at the intermediate school, the SAC counselor, I guess that's the way she coordinates appointments from teachers to her. But how wonderful would it be to have a link that kids can click on right where, they bring up the Google Classroom or whatever, and be able to click on and ask for a counseling session. I mean, I just think that we're doing what we can, but maybe just a little bit more user-friendly for the kids to be identified. So that's my other point. And lastly, recruiting parent professionals. I think you have some good news for that, right? You went to a PTA meeting.
I spoke with the PTA. Yes, I spoke with the PTA last week about that. They asked me to put together like a flyer that we can then give to them so that they can push that out as far as what exactly we're looking for. So I met with them on Thursday. So I spoke to Ms. Zona about getting that together, and we should have that soon that we can push out to the PTA presidents.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then Ms. Talarico, you know, and I apologize, you know, we just wanted to just touch on these meetings that we had board representation on. I know we talked about a lot already in Dr. Stefankowicz's report because it primarily focused on a reopening schedule. If there was anything you wanted to add from reopening on the 21st, if not, certainly not necessary. We just wanted to provide the opportunity.
I appreciate that, Mrs. Fuller. I think Dr. Spagos did touch upon everything. I mean, from my scribble here, I pretty much just wrote down just data and statistics that he had spoken about. So I'm good with the report he gave. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll open it up to the rest of the board for any other old business.
Quick question about the wellness.
Ms. Hazen, then Ms. Beal.
So prior to becoming a Board of Ed member, I'm sure many of you are aware that I used to Oprah a lot of documents, and the Wellness Committee agendas I would get from Ms. Zona as a private citizen, public citizen. So I'm wondering if we can continue that, and I'd like to get those agendas. Like Ms. Talarico said, there are no minutes, which would be nice. But I think the board would benefit from getting the agendas for some of these committees. So I would like to see them as they are mailed out to the committees.
Well, actually, you know, we can open it up for discussion from the board, but I actually think that is why we have, those are district committees. They are not board committees, unlike finance, personnel, et cetera. And that's why we have board representatives on the committees who serve is just that, liaisons from the board to those committees, and then come and report back to the full board. And board members can certainly engage with their board colleagues in advance of those meetings to say, you know, is this being discussed, or I would love to know more about this, and get additional feedback. But I think the point of the board representatives is just that these are district committees that are comprised of members of the public, board members, administration, teachers, other staff and professionals, and the board has one component of that voice, you know, through the representative or representatives on those, but certainly would open it up to other members of the board for their thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know, Alex, you and I had spoken about it briefly, and I have to agree with Mrs. Fuller on this. I just, you know, after speaking to you about it, I thought about it, and this allows each board member who does serve on a committee to have that, you know, responsibility to come back to the board. I personally enjoy the reports that I hear from the board, and I feel that if we all begin receiving agendas, I almost feel like we're stepping on each other's toes, and we're taking away that individuality that they have to that particular committee. So, you know, and at that point, we're almost like micromanaging. So I kind of like it the way it is. You know, they're always open to answering questions, and being that they're just there as a liaison, we are just, we just get the information that we need to know. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah. And I'm not asking for the liaisons to not give their reports. I mean, my husband could make all those Oprah reports tomorrow and get the committee agendas as well. So I don't understand why, if one board member wants the agendas, even if I just tuck it away in my Board of Ed folder every week.
I mean, I would be curious to know why, you know, why the agenda, why you would want to know the agenda like ahead of time.
It can be afterwards, frankly. It can be afterwards. I'm a note keeper. I'm a journalist, as you guys know. So whatever Amy just said, which was very detailed, and Grace Attitude, which is very detailed, I'm not going to remember all that, and I take notes. And if it's a publicly available document that anybody can get, and there's parents on this committee as well, I just feel that if I'm requesting an agenda, I feel like I should get it, or everyone should get it if we want.
I don't know, that's just my opinion. I don't know how.
I don't want to detract from what everybody's reports are, and I'm not asking for that. I just would like to have them.
Yeah, I guess I mean, look, I think Janice said something, that these are district-run committees, right? And we're a representative that's supposed to be listening in and kind of being part of it. So, I mean, I'm happy listening to Amy's report and kind of getting that, but I don't want the administration or the principals to feel like that we are governing them at that level. And if there's and I know that once you get those things, everybody pokes holes in stuff and decides to commentate on it and tweak it and say, why wasn't this covered? And everything gets scrutinized, and I think we're kind of trying to do a little bit of what the people who are running the committee are trying to do and what the principals are really chartered to govern. So,
You know, I've shared before, I work for a nonprofit. I have a board of directors that I report to, and I try to put that hat on to compare this when I'm making certain decisions. And as an employee, I would never give my board at work an agenda from a meeting that we had. You know, our job as employees and managers of that agency is to report to the board on the big stuff. And I don't want agendas. To me, if it comes to us, we're obligated to read it and pay attention to it. And I think that the verbal reports that are presented more than suffice. But if we were to receive agendas for the wellness, and you know, there's a dozen or 15 committees, I don't want 15 agendas every month. That's my opinion.
Well, I think you know, I tend to agree. I mean, I've never really thought about an agenda from something that I wasn't on. I think that it's always helpful when somebody says, you know, did you cover this in wellness, or is there something you can talk about? Or did you cover this in technology or security or wherever, instructional council, and kind of say, maybe see if you can get that added to an agenda, or, you know, be something that you can bring up as a board person, you know, as a board liaison to the committee. I think in years past, we always looked at these committees as a liaison, almost as there were times where it was like a budgeted thing, right? So you could listen and you could say, Dr. Stankiewicz would say, well, in technology, we're going to need this, this, and this. And then he would speak about it. And then we had the insight from a board liaison to say, I was in that meeting and I can tell you the reason why they need this, which sometimes you can appeal to the board a little bit more than maybe Dr. Stankiewicz would, or, you know, Ken would, and say that, you know, this is what's happening. So that's I mean, that's where I would be. I mean, I feel like Denise said, it's kind of micromanaging not just the other board members, but also the committee as a whole. And I feel like our staff is going to start being like, if I'm going to be scrutinized on maybe an agenda or a, you know, I don't know, a decision, that they might not want to serve on these committees where they're so valuable to a committee.
Ms. Beal? Yep, go ahead, Ms. Beal.
So I do want to just preface this with, professionally, I lead a team. The team has agendas. The team has deliverables, action items, post-action reports. I will say, I have noticed with the board presentations, they are not, other than specific items, they are not written. And even social organizations that I was president of, or regional representatives for, if you didn't have a written report, you didn't present. However, I certainly understand that with the Board of Education, the custom, et cetera, you share out. So there isn't a written report. If I had to look at just one of my peers' concerns as far as wanting to see an agenda, I don't necessarily need to see an agenda item personally. If there's a committee that I have a question about, I'm going to that source. But for example, when Amy gave her report, very detailed, and I'm jotting down, like for example, my question earlier was going to be, who was the presenter who's coming in September, and what's the platform for that presentation? So although I don't necessarily personally need to see an agenda, I think that for transparency, if people have certain concerns about a committee's work, then it needs to be addressed with the lead of that committee and
for example, I'm a visual person. I need to see it. So I can jot down quickly, but personally, I'm not used to a format where you just share out. As I mentioned, I lead a team professionally. I've been a president of social organizations. And if you didn't have a written report, you did not present. I get that it's different here, but it would be helpful when there are certain accomplishments just to have even bullet points. You don't obviously have to go into Roman numeral 1, 1A, 1B,
Right.
1C. However, it would be nice to know, and Amy, forgive me because I'm can't read my
No, that's all right.
but you read off a lot of items, and my first thought was, well, how do the kids know about this? How does this? Okay, so I see the counselors are doing this, the counselors are doing that. But
I'm happy to type up a synopsis if it's okay with Ms.
But
Fuller.
that's the thing,
You know, I'm
don't-
happy to type up a synopsis from the meeting and maybe share it with Ms. Talarico to see if she has anything to add. At least for our, for the wellness committee. I can't speak to the other committees, but I'm happy to, I can talk to Ms. Fuller about it and we can maybe discuss it, even just what I'm gonna maybe report on, even if it's after my report, if you'd rather be after, before, whatever, we can do that and maybe that takes care of kind of both sides.
Right, so as far as I'm concerned, if I have a specific question about a report, I will go to the source, ask for example, I would have probably texted you like, well, who's this? Or what was that information? So I would just say that, I don't know, Alex, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you necessarily mean the agendas or more of a summary. But I think that there are some passion points for the board that may not necessarily be a passion point for someone else, but I don't believe that it's a scrutiny type of situation. And maybe I'm just looking at it with rose-colored lenses, but I just think that it's more so about if someone is passionate about something, they just want to see examples of what's being done. That's all.
And I think too, agendas aren't always an accurate reflection of what happens at the meeting. They are the guiding of the discussion, but it doesn't necessarily reflect all of the topics that were discussed, the level of detail that was discussed, what was added, what was never gotten to, et cetera. So you might get an agenda that says 10 topics were discussed, but in reality, because of time, 2 were discussed and 10 things that never made it onto the agenda are actually what wound up being discussed at the meeting. Ms. Talarico, and then Ms. Gilman.
So I would just like to make one point. I mean, I've been on many committees, mental health committees, and every committee I've ever been on, there's minutes. So maybe not so much the agenda because it's very broad, but the minutes basically say what was done in the meeting. And because the Wellness Committee is such a new committee and it's so important because of everything that's going on right now in the world, there's people that are going to be very interested to see what progress we're making, what our goals are, what the outcomes are, the timeframes. I mean, in my opinion, I think the minutes would even be more, important than the agenda. I would like to see minutes. And I do think that, maybe we don't need to have every board member get every single minutes or agenda. I get that it's a lot, you get a lot of emails as it is, and maybe that's not something every board member wants. But if a board member wants a certain, committee minutes because they're interested, we don't have the time, I guess, to go and sit in every committee. And we're in 4 as it is, but maybe if there's another one that we're just interested in, we can ask for the committee minutes. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that, honestly.
Thanks, Ms. Talarico. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's something that could get discussed at future wellness meetings if there's a way for there to be a report, whether it's literal minutes, in the way we do, or more of a summary, right, that could get distributed to others who are concerned, or like a little newsletter update, right? This is what's happening with wellness.
It does get done in instructional council. It does, at some of our committees, we do have that, so.
Right. Yeah, like security I feel like security council had minutes,
Yeah,
right?
we
I
did
think I'm
some.
remembering that correctly. So maybe that's something at the next wellness meeting could
Yeah.
be discussed
I'll
amongst the
dis- I'll
committee.
discuss it
how-
with Ms. Zona tomorrow.
Okay, I'm sorry. Dr. Spangen
No,
will
it's
discuss with Ms. Zona. Sure.
I'll do technology minutes. when we have
Technology
one.
minutes?
Yeah, I'll
But
do
technically,
technology.
you can't take the minutes because it's a district committee, right?
Um,
It doesn't
and then
have
Ms.
to be
Gil-
somebody
Ms. Where'd
from.
Ms. Gilman go? There you are, Ms. Gilman.
Is there a kennel
Perhaps
thing?
the district liaisons will be okay with.
Ms. Gilman, I'm sorry, your audio is gone again. Ms. Gilman, we can't hear you.
Okay.
everyone on the committee
There's your bet.
after each meeting. And I use those minutes in my presentation to the board. But I have to agree with Ms. Talarico. The Wellness Committee is brand new, and that information was given out so quickly that I also would like to see minutes from that meeting and, you know, have further discussion about topics that I think are very, very important. I don't mean every single committee should, you know, read off of minutes for their presentation, but instructional council, we do it all the time, and the minutes go out to everyone. I'm not sure if every board member gets the email. I know that I do, but I use those minutes for the presentation. So maybe not agenda, but definitely bullet points, as Shawanda said, talking points, brief summary of important aspects.
Yeah, I think the minute suggestion for wellness is a great idea, and
Yeah,
Dr.
well,
Stefankiewicz
I mean-
can talk to Ms. Sona about how to implement that, but can I just?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no. And then I think, you know, we'll use the board reports from each of these committees as, you know, a way to spurn conversation of topics that other board members want more information on, whether it means we add it to a future board meeting agenda for us all to talk about, or something they can follow up with individually with that board member too.
I'm sorry, thank you. You know, the purpose of the board liaisons has always been to report the happenings of the committee back to the board. That was always the purpose, that's the function. If the board would prefer that to be, to have a bulleted synopsis presented along with a verbal synopsis at the meeting, you know, but a bulleted synopsis presented in the agenda prior to the board meeting report out, that could certainly be done.
But should that be given by?
I think it's the board. I think that's the purpose of the board liaison being there.
No, I understand that, but I didn't know if the minutes were going.
I don't think we're talking about minutes.
No, we're talking about
report.
your report to put down, you know, a couple bullet points, what have you, that could go in a Friday agenda so that everybody on the board can see the gist of what was discussed, and you could still provide the verbal report out. As far as district-wide committees and minutes, they are typically, when we have them, they would typically go to the members of that committee. In the case of instructional council, Ms. Gilman is correct that they remember, instructional council is really run by the association. They keep the minutes, they send them out to their membership, which is all of the staff. They don't send them to the board as a whole.
In charge of the agenda.
Right, they're in charge of doing that. So, you know, typically for district committees, the minutes would go to the members of that committee, not to the full board. I think that's the purpose of the board liaison, to be there for that purpose, to bring that information back to the board.
But I think recognizing the importance of minutes being taken at the wellness
Sure.
committee, and as other committees do similarly.
Agreed.
In terms of, you know,
Correct.
instituting that practice. It is a new committee, right? It's,
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
so now that we
That's-
can talk about instituting that as we do for other committees
Not a
as
problem.
well.
Yep.
Does that answer Alex's question? Is that what Alex is looking for?
I'm frankly happier with minutes. I focused on the agenda because when I used to Oprah them, I asked for the agenda and the minutes, and I only got the agendas. So I was under the impression that the only thing typed up was the agendas.
For
But-
many meetings, it is correct. Just agendas. And for some of them, you know, for reopening, for example, you know, there's an email the day before from Dr. Stefankiewicz. that
Sometimes 2
essentially
days,
says-
sometimes 2 days,
Sometimes 2 days.
mostly 1 day, but
Oh,
sometimes
yeah,
2 days.
I've even asked for those before.
But I will tell you, you know, the agenda for that, it's, at this point, it is, we will talk about reopening the schools, right? So that is not,
Yes, minutes would be better for something like that too.
well, we're not, I mean, we're not talking about for reopening, I don't think we're talking about doing minutes for reopening. I think we're talking about the wellness committee specific to that,
Yeah.
you know,
I
instituting the
mean,
policy. and
pretty
practice.
much everything we talk about at reopening
Is
comes back to
discussed.
this board, and I'm delivering
Is
it.
very
and,
thoroughly
You know,
discussed
yeah.
already.
Okay, so I am going to do a synopsis that'll go out Friday. We're also going to discuss minutes.
You're gonna, Dr. Spankwitz is gonna
Yeah,
discuss
that's what I
minutes
mean.
I'll
with
discuss
Arizona,
minutes,
and that
yes.
can go forward. And then
Yes.
as board members are doing board reports, if they, you know, can issue them verbally, but if they have things that they think would be, you know, if they have, like Ms. Beal said, right, the name of the speaker and things like that, that they want to make sure that people can remember and take forth, you know, you can send something to Ken to append to the agenda.
Okay. Thank
That'd be
you.
great.
Good.
Other new business, I'm sorry, old business, we're still on old business, other old business from the board. And I would just ask, Ken, could you give an update as to where the solar stuff stands with Spiesel? That was alliteration right there. The solar stuff stands from Spiesel?
I think I got it. They're working on it. I
Okay.
hope in an upcoming meeting, they can come in and give us a report back as to, you know, their findings. They're analyzing, we've provided them with, they came in to look at roofs and blueprints, and we provided them bills for electric bills past year or so. So we've been working with them, and they're working
Okay.
on it.
Thank you. Other old business from the board? No one in the room. Old business at home? All right, seeing none. New business from the board? Any members with new business? Going once?
Can't think this late.
All right, so then hearing and seeing none, and please let me know if I don't see you. We'll move on to public comment. Our second public comment can again be on any item, not just agenda, it can be on any topic. Please send a chat to the help desk, and Ms. Conway will help you. And please, Ms. Conway, let us know if we have anyone in the queue to make a comment or ask a question.
Yes, we do. We have two public commenters. Our first public commenter is Rita Condolian.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Rita Condolian, French teacher, Ocean Township Intermediate School. And I have a few things. Two regarding the SEL. One is that there was a SAC referral put onto Power School. It's in the daily bulletin, like so on the left-hand side, when you log into Power School, it's under daily bulletin, and there's like a blue link to click to the SAC form. I know it can be filled out by parent, teacher, and counselor, and then the fourth option is other. So I don't know if a student themselves can fill that out as other, but that is there, and that was brought up in our faculty meeting today.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
Second, regarding SEL, at the intermediate school, our SEL for teachers tends to meet on the exact same day, the exact same time. And that just, in my opinion, conflicts with my extra help that I always, so it'd be nice if they could possibly, you know, mix it up and have it at different times so that teachers, you know, who have other commitments at that time, like extra help, would be able to participate in teacher SEL.
Oh, so you mean it's like always Tuesday at 2, just to make, for an example.
Correct.
So if you're busy at Tuesday at 2, you never get to go. So maybe if it was some time, got it, understood.
Yes, yes. So it'd be nice if, you know, just as a suggestion, if they could mix it up for teacher SEL.
Yeah, Rita, I mean, I would just suggest just mention that to Mr. Amato. I'm sure that they can address that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
My second topic is the school calendar. So I know you discussed, and we didn't get to see, the proposed school calendar for next year, but I had a question about our current school calendar. So I think I heard you said that staff can't work more than 187 days, but I'm not sure, Dr. Stefanowicz, is that correct?
That is correct.
So then if we do not use the 2 snow days that are built in and we're doing virtual days instead, we will, the staff, be getting those 2 days back at the end of the year?
Well, what's it worth to you, Rita?
I just know that if we're not going to use them as, I know in the past, sometimes we have gotten them back because we had like that rotavirus and we had to close down.
Rita, I think we all can agree that you know, we would, as hard as everybody's worked, you know, getting to our summer is a good thing, right?
I'm very happy to hear you say that, sir. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
I didn't hear a bunch of guff from my son who didn't get a chance to have a snow day the last 2 days, so we could, stay as long as we possibly could in June.
Thank you. Anyone else with public comment or questions?
Yes, there's one more, Sandy Abdelaziz.
Thank you.
You're really nailing that, Marianne.
It's 2 times.
You're nailing it.
Our daughters played field hockey together. She should know how to say. Okay, so I have one that I forgot to ask before regarding your report, Dr. Stefankowitz. When you send the survey out, I believe you said sometime within the next week or 2, whatever, will that survey also tell the parents who are filling out the survey, or the student, or whoever's filling it out, what the schedules will look like in the
Sandy,
schools?
I'm going to be really honest with you. We're holding off here so that when that questionnaire goes out, there's as little question as possible, because we have taken everything you've said regarding every survey that we've ever sent out to heart, Sandy. And I mean this sincerely. We're trying to make it as thorough as possible so that there's as little confusion as possible, and everybody knows, to the best of our ability, it's never going to be perfect, but to the best of our ability, what they are signing up for and agreeing to.
Okay, that would be fantastic, because no matter what, I'm going to have somebody like, I didn't sign up for that, because I got that with this past snow day also, and I had to bring up your little charts and say, no, no, no.
We got charts.
Look, I put the charts up, I did.
Thank you, Sandy. I only got
Okay,
one email, so you did a good job. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, thank you. I don't recall, but this is my next set of questions. There's only 2 more. I've been in this district for 20 plus years. I only recall 1 year where we actually had an early dismissal on the day before the Christmas winter break. Is that happening? Why did it happen the one time? Why did it stop happening? Those type of questions.
That's a contractual item that needs to be negotiated. I did it 1 year because I'm just a hell of a guy.
Well, it's the only year that I ever remember.
Yeah, it was a few
20-something
years
that it
back.
happened.
But that is an item, we are in a negotiation year. That's certainly something, for example, the early dismissal before Thanksgiving is a contractual thing. It's in our, it's in our contract. So that is, that's something that can be negotiated, that, we certainly be willing to have that conversation.
Well, I was just looking because, I think we start winter break very late this year, upcoming year. It's like the 24th is the first day off or something. So I think it would be nice to have that half day, an extra half day there. And also, I didn't see, I looked at it very quickly when Janice put it up, but was there any mention about, I know it probably had the normal standard line about the 2 days built in, and if any extra days would be added on at the end, that's the standard normal line on every one of your calendars. But is there any wording on there about how we would use remote learning on days instead, like what we've just decided to start doing now?
It will, not at this time. It will all depend on whether remote learning is still an option in next year. The only reason remote learning right now for inclement weather days is even possible is because of the governor's executive order, which allows for a remote option to take place during the pandemic. It's a pandemic related situation. I would like to say that I think we all would agree and hope that I would not be putting language like that on the calendar next year. Because meaning we would no longer be in the current situation we're in. So we'll have to wait and see what the governor says. And if the governor does allow for that option to continue for next year, or, the Department of Education, then we would, similarly decide if we're going to do like we're doing this year and do the early dismissal remotes, or whether we want to, do the snow days or, whatever. We can make that decision at that point.
So that comes down to like the governor or the Department of Education saying that they would count a remote learning day as a school day. That's what
Correct.
That would be? Okay,
That's
all right,
correct.
that makes sense. So technically right now, as we sit here today, snow days may not be a thing of the past, correct?
Correct. I hope
A lot
they're
of people
not.
will be happy to hear that.
I hope they're not. And also too, I saw a lot of great pictures on Twitter yesterday of teachers who were very creative about how they conducted their classes, which enabled kids to get outside and do a lot of fun and exciting things in the snow. Science teachers who did cool things about go out and kind of measure, how much, do measurement, to math teachers who did things with measuring snow. Lots of really cool, creative ways that teachers allowed kids to get out there and have some fun in the snow while learning something too.
And I saw Mr. Amato had a snowman contest.
Snowman contest, all good stuff.
Yeah, that was cool. All right, thank you. That was it.
Sure.
Thank you. Ms. Conway, anyone else?
At this time, there are no more public commenters.
All right. So
I have
that'll
one
bring.
question. I'm sorry. I should ask before in the old business. I was just wondering, where are we with the action committee for the special ed strategic planning?
They met, I think, today, if I'm not mistaken. The Zona met with the special ed group today. And Ms. Lepusnik either met within the last couple of days or is about to meet. I apologize, I don't know that exact, but from what I understand, the special ed committee had a very productive meeting today, and we are very hopeful that we're on the time frame to have, the action plans by the regular meeting on the 16th.
All right. So I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. We are actually not going to adjourn the meeting. We need to go back into exec. So I'm going to read the language that will allow us to do so. So that's why we won't actually be adjourning the meeting, but I thank everyone for joining us tonight. And no action will be taken when we return to executive session. It's only for discussion. We will be taking no action.
And just Ms. Conway, before you log out, can you just make sure that we can get back to the
I'm gonna log in right now.
exec
I'll
link,
log in.
please? I'm sorry.
Right. All right, thank you. Move for the approval to enter executive session in conformance with the Open Public Meeting Act for the purpose of discussing student matter. It is anticipated at this time the above stated subjects will be made public at such time as the need for non-disclosure no longer exists. The Board of Education will be in executive session for, we'll say approximately 20 minutes and hopefully, and will not take action upon returning to work session. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, see everyone in exec.
We just join that other link from before.